残酷な天使のように少年よ神話になれ青い風が今胸のドアを叩いても私だけをただ見つめて微笑んでるあなたそっと触れるもの求めることに夢中で運命さえまだ知らない痛いけな瞳だけどいつか気づくでしょうその背中には
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Longhouse, a show about art, culture, politics, philosophy, etc. All that good stuff. Of course, as always, with what I like to call a true right Nordic perspective. I hope you all enjoyed that intro. I spent probably far too much time making it, and I had a lot of fun doing it, so it's no sweat of my back. Tonight we're leaning heavily into, of course, the high culture part of it, as we're going to be talking about anime. Now, that's been a question that's been going around in the right-wing circles for quite a time, and I'm undecided on the topic. But Luddic Path and Jason here, as our guest, have decided that they want to introduce me and they want to talk about some of the more based sides of anime. Let's try to keep away from, as I called it, the anime parts of anime. Of course, Luddic Path, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. It's fun to be on as usual. Well, like you said, I mean, anime has been hit pretty hard in the dissident rights circles. You've had Mr. Academic Agent going out in sort of complete, anti-anime mode. The Distributist has also been kind of rough with anime, but I see a lot of the people in the chat, and I know there's a lot of interest in our spheres for this particular thing. So I thought, like, we have this show, we might as well be able to give anime a fair shake and see, we know about the weebery, we know about the nonce stuff and the panties and the high school and all this sort of dumb stuff, but let's take a look at, what parts of anime is sort of salvageable. I mean, what's cool about it, and maybe there is something interesting to this art form.
I think it's, from an artistic perspective, I think it is foolish to deny an entire medium just because someone uses it for evil. In that sense, I suppose we can shut down movies as well, and books even. We have to be able to.
The Japanese are like almost like an inherently based race of people, so there's no reason why they shouldn't be able to create based entertainment, or why the stuff that is they take all this Western stuff, it rubs off on them, and they sell it back to us without a lot of the baggage that exists in our cultural context.
Yeah. With us, we also have a fellow friend, Jason, who wanted to talk and show us all the anime Legend of Galactic Heroes. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Yes. Just a sip of my drink here. Now, we had the pre-stream. I really enjoy seeing you all hanging out in the chat. So I think we're going to just move right into what we usually call Last Week in Containment, which is our weekly news roundup. Now, this week there hasn't been many news. It's summertime, not much going on. Oh, one sec.
Well, there's a lot of continuation of these, what I call the new storylines, the Ukraine arc and the abortion arc, and a lot of these dumb, the January 6th hearings. But I just don't give a shit about any of it, honestly. You want to cover some new stuff, and maybe there's some stuff that falls under the radar of some of these other dissident right shows.
And if you don't, if you look at the news and you don't care about one of those big narratives, I mean, there's really been very little going on. But we did find one thing. I'm not sure if you want to catch us up, Luddic, with where we left off last time we talked about the newspaper reset.
Well, we thought it was going to be the end. I mean, the founder, Helge Luros, has basically been fired by the board. Half the staff has been fired. And, at this point, I thought, we're just going to ignore this newspaper. There's no interest. And to be fair, we're still going to continue ignoring the newspaper. But, there's still the other kind of quote-unquote base Norwegian blog or news outlet, document.no, that had an article covering like what they call the new reset, basically like the new politically correct, kinder and gentler reset. Now that they have the Maria Saylor, that's like the Primus tranny, as an editor of the magazine. So they had 2 articles coming out recently. One about basically let's see here. There we go.
They had an article here talking about how children of immigrants are usually more neutral or positive towards homosexuality. Now that's a bit of a twist on the actual report, which says that compared with ethnic Norwegian youths, they are far more against homosexuality, but of course less than their parents. And this article here, I'm not sure if we're going to read all of it because it's quite long, but it really goes in hard at attacking where this paper is now headed, under the command of Maria Saylor here.
Yep.
And especially let me see if I can find the quote here. So here Saylor has written an editorial for Reset where they talk about how Reset is going to act going forward and what content the readers can expect. And it states explicitly that right-wing extremism and radicalization on the far right are still prevalent threat to almost anyone who does not fit in. Anti-Semitism still lives there. Today, Muslim hatred and homophobia are probably the most prominent feature of the Norwegian right-wing extremism, and some of the most popularized attitudes that exist far beyond what we normally consider to be extremism are based on aversions to Muslims. So the new editor of Reset, a paper that basically founded itself on counter-jihadism, is now telling its readers to fuck off, really. And it also pulls up specifically anti-Semitism, which is a bit of a red flag for me, and telling me that this is straight up just going to be containment news from now on.
Yes, I mean that's exactly what it's going to be. I mean, to put the homosexual acceptance article into context, in Norway we have what's called NTB. That's, for the American viewers, it's a similar service to AP Wire. That's sort of this generalized news service that all of the big newspapers use because it's cheaper. You can basically cut down on staff, and this is part of the reason that everybody's writing about the same things, because they just borrow these sort of pre-finished, pre-written stories that they edit a little bit and put their own twist on it. Yes. The reason that it's brought up here and why it's significant is because the quote-unquote twist that Reset put on this story was actually more kind of paused in a sense than the actual NTB article itself. Like, they actually did more work in trying to paint over the quote-unquote problem. We're trying to make they did a better job trying to make Muslims look good than even the mainstream newspapers did, and that's why this is commenting on the message here. Yeah. They're really trying to go hard in on, like, this is the new and improved Reset. That we're like a serious paper, so you have to gush even harder about all this pause.
That is obviously what they've been brought on to do. Whoever the people ended up being behind the coup of Luros, because the board has explicitly stated that they want a more quote unquote serious approach to news. and we can critique Luros for taking on, whoever wanted to write, but what is forming now is explicitly a containment paper to make sure that people never encounter ideas outside of the Overton window anymore.
Yes, I mean, it's streamlined, it's just going to copy all of the other newspapers and try to, I guess, just use Facebook ads. I don't know how they're going to stay relevant if they're losing, that market share of these comment section warriors that have been following them for so long. I mean, I guess the other interesting thing to point out here when she's talking about far-right extremists is that she's not clear on who these people are exactly. It's very interesting. You talk about the rise of far-right wing extremism in Norway.
Who
is it? Who are you talking about exactly?
As the writer here says, he says she doesn't specify who she's referring to, but the fact that Norwegian right-wing extremists are so few that they have to import like-minded people from Sweden and Finland when they arrange any kind of demonstration, it should be telling. We did a dive on the Norwegian right and show you guys the guys in the woods doing their rituals.
Authentic
basically
paganism.
What you have are what you refer to as the football hooligan types of the extreme right, and that's it. There's no actual threat anywhere.
No, I mean, you have, I guess, Hans-Jørgen Lysglimt. I mean, there's a lot of really weird particular people that are probably so weird that they're really on the boundary of functional society. And I mean, that's, in my view, that's one of the projects that needs to change, is that we can create a more kind of functional right wing that retains the kind of hardcore ideas without really sacrificing function in the same way. And when I mean function, it's not a mechanical sense. I'm literally talking about just being a functional human being that can pay your bills and present well to the neighbors, basically. Not scare people away like I think a lot of these the people in the wood are doing.
Doran DeLuz says, is it far right or normal right-wing beliefs that are called far right? Well, it depends on your perspective. Was it Evola that said that my only crime is believing something that was common 100 years ago? He says something akin to that, and I think it's revolt.
Well, it's very interesting and almost paradoxical with Maria Saylor coming out and saying this, because her newspaper and her opinions have been labeled as right-wing. So where she draws the line on right-wing extremism, I mean, this is a sort of term that I've been thinking a lot about, the extremist term, because it is a pejorative and it's not something that we should use about ourselves, ever. But when do you draw the line between somebody being right-wing and somebody being right-wing extreme? Because the extremism part, it sort of has connotations of terrorism, basically.
That's
political
that's
action that's kind of outside of legal.
That's obviously the link they're trying to form by labeling anything as extremism. But what is interesting is that, and I think this is part of why Reset is still around, and rather that the reason that it wasn't just shut down is that it now exists in a very interesting space where it gets to define what far right in Norway is inside the Overton window, because Reset is going to be the far right paper no matter what it does right now.
It will still be referred to as that.
Yeah.
Yes.
So they get to define what that means.
Yes, it's perfect. And now we see it in real time, right? The original founders, they come in and they're not able to perform, I guess, in this sort of strict business sense of making the inputs and outputs add up. And then they get thrown out, and the board still exists and the money behind it still exists and the owners changed. And so the name is there and the association is still there, but none of the actual, content has retained the integrity that it had. Well, I mean integrity in the sense that it was actually slightly right-wing in the beginning.
Yeah.
This is like Robert Conquest's 3 laws, isn't it? The any organization that's not explicitly right-wing,
yes, will
become left-wing,
given enough time. So what I think is going to happen here is that any more right-wing viewers are going to flee to places like Document that we're reading here, or they're going to go into their own forums at this point, because Reset, despite it being a quote-unquote far-right paper, was still pretty much boomer slanted anti-Islam content, really.
Yeah, it is what I like to call, Overton window right wing, or recognizable right wing from a Norwegian kind of post World War II perspective, because like somebody with our views is basically like so far outside of that spectrum that I don't think the normie person could even understand it. Like, you could just explain, this is my worldview. Where does this fit in on the spectrum? And I don't think they couldn't even make sense of it unless you brought up some hardcore racial stuff.
Yeah, it's hard to introduce people to these ideas out of nowhere.
Yeah, I don't think that these ideas will
that.
ever be. They will not be mainstream, right? These ideas, it's just gonna, like, our vision is basically to have like a new sort of political elite that shares the views that we have. Like, for the regular person to get into, stuff like just say, foreign policy realism, which is the thing in the dissident right. I mean, this is something that, Henry Kissinger was practicing in the 70s. Like, there's a reason that they stopped doing it. If you watch the Adam Curtis documentary, hyper normalization, like they, this was just so unpopular that they had to switch over to this kind of Reagan pro wrestling kind of kayfabe politics, where foreign policy is basically explained as like this kind of storyline. It is politics for silly people, basically. I mean, that's what works.
You have to label whatever, bad guy of the week as a brand of Hitler, right? Because we're still fighting World War II.
The heels and the faces. So yeah, Putin is currently taking a heel turn, and the Azov battalion is taking a face turn.
Right.
That's where.
So the Captain America is fighting alongside the Azov battalion and Zelensky to defeat Putin because he's the real evil. Yeah. Yep. It's just repeating itself. Okay, I'm sorry if I'm a bit low energy tonight. I donated blood earlier, so I'm still feeling some of the after effects.
Wow. How much did you donate? Like a liter?
Oh,
half?
A regular amount. I think that's like let me see. What's the usual amount?
A liter sounds a bit drastic. I think you'd be completely.
Yeah, I think it's half or something. Yeah. I can't figure it out. But you feel a bit drained for the rest of the day. But it's nice. You get to go there. They give you food. Everyone who works there is a cute blonde nurse. Who's very
you got a free meal, basically.
You got a free
meal and a lollipop.
They'll probably use my blood for some globalist ritual, but at least I got.
No, it's all of the refugees that are coming into Norway by boat who have lost blood. They will be reinvigorated by by your blood. That's what's gonna happen.
Yes. I did check off. They wanted you do like a questionnaire, and they want you to. They have like a. Do you want to donate your blood to anonymously for international research? And I pressed no. And they tried to talk me into it, but I said no. And then I'll hope it doesn't. I hope it goes to someone who actually needs it.
Yes. No, I mean, I didn't realize, but like Norway still practices, anti-gay discrimination when it comes to blood banks. I mean, thank God.
Yeah, there's 15 questions about that basically asks, do you have gay sex? Did you ever have HIV? Did you have you ever smelled anyone who's been to Africa? Yeah, things like that.
Is Grindr installed on your phone?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. You're out immediately. Like I remember reading an article. I don't know if you brought this up previously, but there was this guy complaining about like the discrimination. Like, I want to donate blood to get one of these Russeknut, like one of these,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what the proper translation of that would be, but just to get one of these marks in your hat when they're doing this kind of post high school celebration thing, and one of them is to you donate blood and you get a one of these badges on your hat. And he was oh, they're discriminating because I'm gay. Yeah, we should probably just loosen those discrimination laws a little bit. I mean, a part of me actually wants to do that. Just when the people talk about that, there's
to
like
see how. I mean, we already have the monkeypox thing coming, and it's already started to infect heterosexual people in the
like
US.
99% men or something. So
yeah.
But I mean, for the people who say that there's no negative externalities to these alternative lifestyles, and just we'll just remove these barriers to blood donation then, and we can see how quickly how you feel about it. Righto. I think we covered this.
Yeah, Jason, do you have anything you would like to add to? I don't know if you followed this any of this stuff that we've been covering.
Not much, but Document is a more based newspaper anyway, so
it's time to switch over. Anyone who was reading Reset, I don't know who those people are. I don't think they listen to us. If they were,
it's a little weird. I mean,
LOGH cow has been fully milked. Yeah. Okay, let's get into some Jojo's Bizarre Adventure.
Righto. I mean, that's the concept for these streams of how it's going to be, going forward. That there's the reason I called it, Based Anime Part 1. Because we can just do a couple of, we're just going to do a couple of shows for each stream instead of just doing a complete discussion where we're just going to go through like all the 100 possible shows that we could have done. It's going to be way too shallow. And we're not into that. Like, we're going to have to try to dig a little bit and
gotta get
something out of it that you can't get out of.
Even saying that, if we're gonna give anime a fair shake, I think it's just right that we pick, we steel man as they say, with shows that we either enjoy or find touch on subjects that are deeper than just watching young girls panties and going down the tranny pipeline, which
high school
everything that leads to that, and everything I hate about anime are all those things. But as is customary, and as I figured out when I did my research for the Power Metal stream, I just enjoy these things sort of in isolation, and then after years, I just poke my head up and see that everyone else has been paused by it while I've been sitting in my cave like a hermit, enjoying it by myself.
I guess it's different from like really young kids coming into this stuff,
Maybe.
And us as adults starting on some more like Dragon Ball Z and moving up. But I mean, I saw some suggestions in the chat in terms of what people wanted to talk about. I'm just going to iterate over a little list that I wrote down of anime that we're going to cover, or at least that we're planning to do. Let's see, Berserk, Attack on Titan, Neon Genesis Evangelion, Death Note, Ghost in the Shell, Vinland Saga, Psycho Pass, Tengen Toppa Gurren Lagann, Full Metal Alchemist, and Gundam. So if there's any more that I missed that are like potentially cool animes, you can just pop it in the comments, and we will consider it. But yeah, let's get into the kind of meat on this episode. We're going to do two animes, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, this one first, and then we're going to have Jason tell us about Legend of Galactic Heroes, which I think is...
JoJo's Bizarre Adventure is one we all have seen, and Jason told us before the stream that he's also read the manga here. So we're going to defer to him on everything, it seems, today. But Legend of the Galactic Heroes is something I'm completely unfamiliar with. So it's going to be fun to learn about that.
Righto. But so, I mean, most people have, if you're familiar with anime, you're probably encountered JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, or if you've just been on the internet, you've encountered some residue of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. We'll get into this later in the presentation, but I think that this is easily, I mean, people can challenge me on this, but I think this is like the most memeable anime ever. Like, I can't think of any anime that spawned more kind of replicable cultural phenomena than this one. or at
Depends
least
on
of the
what you
certain
mean by
diverse.
saying like most memeable. Is it most memeable in the sense that most like many memes spawned from it? Because I feel a lot of the memes were almost overhyped.
Yeah, well, in the sense that if you look at the Richard Dawkins sense of the word meme, it's like a unit of sort of cultural information that gets passed on, through other mediums. It's like we're doing the whistling game or the game of telephone where people just keep repeating the same ideas. And
Fair enough.
whether it's like the actual memes, as we talk about the know your memes on the internet, I think it's a contender for basically it's a ridiculous amount that I can't even cover how many memes that have been made, but also in terms of the influence that this anime has had on other animes. So we have other animes replicating the same style of action, like the same catchphrases, the same scene for scene things. I mean, you have fighting games, I think, like Street Fighter and other of these that, it's very easy to take from this format, and there's probably more that I can't even name. We could just spend all day digging through it. So I mean, this show has been going for like 35 years, or at least the manga has been going for 35 years, and the anime, I think, at least the recent anime that's been running has been going for about 10. So yeah, maybe I mean, you have animes that have been running longer, but I don't think they've spawned the amount of kind of cultural residue. Righto, but just keep flipping the slides, and we'll see if we can learn a little bit more.
Okay. Let's see if there's any initial impressions here in the chat. Dorandelu says that your list is absolutely based.
Thank you.
Yeah, is it Lanner or Yanner 95? I can never tell. Dragon Ball, One Piece, shouldn't the storyline end? I'm not sure what he's getting at there. Maybe that One Piece is still going. I think
I think so.
One Piece has like a thing, it is ending. There is a clear end, I think. The guy who's making it just has decided that he's going to do it over like 25 years or something.
It's going to end the same way Berserk ends. He just dies, and that's it.
Yeah.
But they started doing Berserk again.
Oh, shit.
Oh, they did?
Yeah, somebody picked it up, and they're doing the manga.
Interesting. If you have a manga, can you still give blood? I don't think so. I think the ink gets into your veins. Post-Explorationism says my favorite anime is Cory in the House. That's not a Zoomer meme. I do remember Cory in the House being like a meme.
Is that like a Disney Channel or something?
I think so, yeah. I was too old to watch it, but I had siblings that I think watched it. I remember like seeing it on the TV. Okay, let's get going.
Hirohiko.
Do you want to talk about what the hell JoJo's Bizarre Adventure is before we get into this?
Yeah, I'm just going to. I mean, I think it's actually really difficult to explain. The next slide, we're just going to try to go and explain the premise to people. But I think we can just show off the author.
Sorry, I see here coming up in the slide that it's okay. You're going to start with the author. Okay. Yes,
I mean, it is like a really difficult show to explain to people if you haven't seen it. I mean, but like I said, you probably have in meme format. So Hirohiko Araki, that is the Japanese author of this show, has been drawing manga for 40 years. JoJo's Bizarre Adventure for 35 years. I mean, I sort of suspect that this is like the true Japanese style of doing these things, and we talked about this a little bit pre-show, that this guy does everything himself. Like, he is going to draw the characters, and he creates the dialogue and the storyline. It's very different from the kind of Western style of doing comics, where they'll have one guy drawing and another guy doing the story, and maybe a third guy doing some sort of touch-up design and stuff.
There's pros and cons with that, because a lot of Western comics have some seminal works that couldn't have been made without the collaboration of multiple people. But there's something to be said, and especially as a One Piece fan, the sort of iron fist direction that a single author can give to a work like that.
But this is like, it's very characteristic for the Japanese and the Japanese economy, I think in particular, where they will have like one person working on a project for their entire life, and they will never, they'll just get one job, stick to that job their entire life. So you get this kind of like hyper specialized individuals working around the clock, taking like 3 days off a year to perfect these sort of things. And I suspect that's one of the reasons that their economy is so strong. I mean, if you look away
It also
from
leads to the meme sort of where you have to wash the rice for 10 years before you can even make a sushi roll.
Yes, I think it's very much the same way of thinking that they have, and like this is the reason they're so productive. And like I'm genuinely convinced that like this is the way to have like high productivity, super high quality products, and not this sort of assembly line style of like.
It is something
what do you call it?
Minimum. Whenever you watch like documentaries from Japan or something, they'll show you how they work, and there's a certain respect and integrity and sort of pride they take in their job, regardless of what they're doing, that they want to do it properly and get really good at it, and sort of have that hierarchical we're all part of something greater mindset when approaching it. It's not that it doesn't happen here, but it's something that we've been working very hard at removing. Let's put it like that.
Western philosophy of you're familiar with the minimum viable product thinking. I mean, this is like the exact opposite of what this stuff is. It's like the maximum viable product. The I think it's based. I'm just going to say that much. So, I mean, this guy, he's not a particularly right-wing individual. It's harkening a little bit back to the Moomin stream that we did with Tove Jansson, and you sort of suspected that Tove Jansson was like a secret right-wing based person, but it turns out...
I'm not saying she was. I'm saying that despite her best efforts, she couldn't eliminate her father in her work, I think is what I said.
No. I mean, like I think that was even before we did the stream.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Where like before you did the research, but now like with this guy as well, it's easy to think that he has some Evolian kind of inclination, like he reads Carlyle. You try to project this stuff onto him, but it's really not the case. He's a quite sort of average Japanese person with not a lot of ideological inclinations, but like the base stuff. I mean, I put a picture of Clint Eastwood in there, that he has the Western influences of a lot of these Clint Eastwood spaghetti Western type things that goes through into his work. And that's like he just imports and sort of respects this sort of very masculine style, and that's where a lot of what I think is the base parts of the show comes in. Of course, also heavily influenced by Western music, as we'll see, whereas like every character in the show has like some reference to like some British classic rock band, and when you run out of those, you'll just go down the line of other musical artists and so on. Influenced by, let's say, how do I pronounce it? Paul Gauguin, and Impressionist art. I think that's sort of the kind of touchstones when it comes to this guy. He before he started with JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, he wrote like a couple of shorter mangas, Cool Shock BT, that was really more of this kind of mystery thriller, magic type of manga. Bao, that's more of the sci-fi horror thing. I mean, you could find it on YouTube. It was made into an anime I think in 1989 or something. And after that, he was just been doing JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. That's been going for, I think, 9 seasons now. So if you flip the slides, we can take a look at
before we move on. I'm going to pull up some chats here. LC says, isn't this conversation all cargo cult bullshit? I mean, I like anime, but it's just a cartoon, right? I mean, yeah, it's just a cartoon, but if that's a bit reductionist, don't you think? I mean, the Bible is just a book. The Lord of the Rings is just a story.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of work going into these animes. I mean, you are talking about people like this who will just spend his entire life trying to create a cartoon, basically. And I mean, I get the it's just a cartoon stuff, but I mean, we're living in modernity, Basically, we're not going to get back this
Yes.
sort of like pure art stuff. So the
Thereon
best we can
be
do is just trying to
arrogant.
scout
Sorry.
around in these sort of residues, right?
Yeah, Aaron B. Arrogant says, how as a man in Christendom can I live more like them to make art such as this and to labor as hard as them? So impressive. I'm not sure if you're being ironic or not, but it's hard on the internet. I don't think you should. I don't know where in the West you're from, but wherever your expression and your culture is, that's going to shape what is good for you. But even beyond that, there are universalist ideas and truths that we can all relate to across cultures in that sense. And I touched about it a bit, I guess, in the Death of Craft video I did, where I sort of lament that we're not spending time dedicating ourselves to a craft anymore, while the Japanese seem to still be doing that. Now it might be a watered down version of what once was, but they seem to have somehow retained some of that. And I'm not saying that the best thing for the Norwegian, specifically, society is to adopt all of that. I mean, God knows getting a Spaniard to do that kind of work would be impossible.
Yeah, you can't just snap your finger.
But they still make beautiful
and
cathedrals,
stuff,
right? Even with their siestas and their Mediterranean attitudes. Okay, I think...
Okay, we're flipping, and we'll try to explain the show now for all the patient viewers that have stuck with us so far. So, okay, the genre of this is basically action, adventure, magical, horror, speculative, maybe a little bit of sci-fi included into it. The word shonen, it's being used, it basically just means like, cartoons or anime for sort of for boys. And that is what, in Japan, how this is marketed, that it's a sort of show that's going to be fun for young boys. The first Jojo manga that was published in an anthology comic series that's called Shonen Jump Weekly, if I'm not mistaken. And like, this is where you'd find stuff like Dragon Ball Z. You've talked about One Piece. You talked about Bleach. Like all these shows where there's fighting. There's basically good versus bad. Very kind of high energy, but also usually it will come at the cost of some complexity. Like it'll be kind of limited how much plot and how much sort of depth of character and how much kind of adult understanding drama you will be able to fit into a shonen without...
You usually don't get the shades of gray.
No. So it's going to be like good guy punches bad guy and like high energy, screaming, jumping all over the place. It's
What is strange is that as someone who has then grown up with the increasingly degenerating Western media, that kind of approach is almost refreshing. Just cutting straight to the point. Almost.
Yes, I mean...
not miring it in some wishy-washy stuff to actually subvert me into something else.
There's a lot of bad storytelling like in Western media, and people who think they're like a lot of midwits who think they have deep stories and interesting things to say, which they don't. And there is something kind of inherently based about this sort of good guy punches bad guy story. And at least in this sense, where the Japanese aren't really in this sort of woke context that we are, so they don't have to reject the masculine. I mean, a lot of the masculinity in these shows is very well preserved. It is preserved in a sense that you have the heroism and the, all the problems are solved with conflict. Like the problems are solved with violence, basically. And there's something inherently, like from this kind of BAP perspective, that is based. That sort of
has to punch the bad guy in the face, otherwise he can't protect his friends. So go punch him in the face, right?
Certainly. Let's see. Okay, the plot of this show. Okay, we're just gonna have to start at the beginning there. So in the top left corner there, you have these two characters that end up kind of setting the tone for the rest of the show. On the right, there's the Jonathan Joestar. That's like this proper British, very typical masculine heroic hero, and then you have like the Dio Brando on the left with the blonde hair. That is sort of the more archetypal kind of like vampire bad guy villain. Where the story goes as such that Jonathan's father owed a favor to some guy who saves his life in the slums of London, and this is in the 18th, I guess in the 19th century, where because he owes him a favor, he's basically has to adopt the son of the guy who saved his life, which is Dio Brando, who is this extremely kind of cruel person with a sort of, what do you call it, a superiority complex, but very smart and very capable of trying to using Machiavellian tricks, using being just straight up psychopathic and trying to usurp kind of all of the family fortunes that is in this sort of Joestar family. And that's where the kind of standard plot starts, where Jonathan has to then defend his family from the kind of intruding Dio Brando, ending in basically Dio turning himself into a vampire. And then, let's see.
I'm just showing some more high detailed pictures of this as you go along, just because the pictures are a bit small.
Yeah, I see. I mean, that's where you see the mask, because he uses the mask to turn himself into a vampire with superpowers, and then Jonathan has to acquire his own type of superpowers through this magic that they call Haman. So it's very much like the standard, I train myself to become strong for my family. He ends up, killing the vampire he thinks, but that doesn't actually happen. So the vampire comes back and actually kills Jonathan. Dio is put underground in a sort of chest where he will
falls
come
into
back.
the ocean.
That's correct. They're on the boat, and he's in a chest. He's sort of like thrown down.
It's actually a coffin, water. Obviously, in like a classic vampire
I don't remember
style.
All of the details.
Yeah, I think it's a coffin. I watched all of this recently.
Yes,
so it's fresh in my mind. It's
good. You're just gonna have to.
The cheese levels in these shows, in that sense, are at max. So of course the vampire guy gets buried in a coffin under the ocean.
But I mean, the reason I have to go so much into detail about this particular season is that it sets the tone, and like there's so many references that go back to this, where this Dio character, if it's either him directly or the people that he associated with or everything that he created, is coming back to sort of haunt the family of the Joestars. So the show is not like, you're not just following one character from season to season. It's sort of like a generational story where, in the first season you follow Jonathan Joestar, and then you get into the second what do you call it, the second part, or the second arc, where it's Jonathan's grandson Joseph that has an adventure, and then it's Joseph's grandson that's going to have another adventure, and it just keeps going into skipping for decades with the characters aging.
Yes,
and having to take on different
spanning various continents and nations as well. It's a very globe-trotting series, because it begins in England with Jonathan, and then his grandson, who grows up in the US and travels all over the world, and I think then it goes to Japan, and then etc. etc.
So with Araki, I mean, having run this series for 35 years, there's of course the problem that it gets stale working over time, and especially if you're just going to create this, standard good guy, bad guy storyline. So as these parts progress, you see a lot more experimentation from Araki, that it starts with, okay, you have a regular British good guy versus the bad guy, and then in the second part, the good guy's a little bit more anti-hero-ish, is a little bit more rambunctious, and has some, what do you call, like these undesirable traits for a hero. Then you're getting into these other characters where the characters themselves are just kind of dubious, and the villains become a little bit more relatable. So it goes from this very kind of, okay, we have the standard hero reacting to the villain, to the heroes that have like stranger motivations. Let's see if you get back to the slide so I could orient where we are at this point. I mean, in part 2, in Battle Tendency, I mean, you watched this one recently as well, where you follow Jonathan's son.
Yes. Yeah.
Going through basically having to react to the sort of awakening of this ancient pillar men.
It basically follows the thread of, hey, hang on a minute, where did the vampire creating mask come from? And it turns out that actually 10,000 years ago there was a race of like superhuman vampires who have been slumbering under the ground, and this guy.
So at this point, I think we're are we like 19? Yeah, so we're like in the 1930s, I think, in part 2.
Yeah.
Because I mean, this series has
to Italy and train in the like magic monk fighting style of the same way that his father or grandfather.
His grandfather.
And like this is the one where he really ramps up his like. All of his drawings are just art studies of the male form, where like everyone is doing bodybuilder poses and. And the muscles get to ridiculous proportions.
Yeah, so that's the interesting parts of it, is that it's very experimental in how it tries to show how the story unfolds. And
you see those guys here.
Well, I mean, we'll get to this later, but like the Giga Chad meme, like this is basically it.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember when
I'm cutting you off.
When they found the Ernst Kalimov or whatever his name is, like they created the Giga Chad theme, and that's basically the song from this show. That's the Pillar Man Awakening theme that they used.
Yeah, they usually use that, or they used the Bring Me the Horizon song. I don't remember what it's called, but yeah.
Yes, Can You Feel My Heart? I think that's the that's the song. So we then go from like the 1930s, 1940s into the 80s, where Joseph is sort of an old man, and his and like the head of the vampire head of Dio is just brought out of the ocean and has like reattached itself to the body of Jonathan. So he's just back for round 2, and then they have to summon the son, or like the grandson of Joseph. That's the Jotaro. Could you bring us maybe some Google image searches of him?
Let me just.
I think he's probably the most famous character, both because of the look and because of the catchphrases. He's very much like this.
One of the funny things about the storytelling of Jojo here is that this is Joseph from the second part, so he's now playing sort of the grandpa to this guy who has to. He's sort of half mentoring him. Sorry, continue.
So yes, you see him here with the crew, and in this show we're in the 80s basically, and it has very much this 80s style of the kind of exaggerated muscle, the He-Man aesthetic, and like the difference like with how these stories are told and how the comics are done is that they now start using this sort of what's called a stand ability. That's really like this kind of spiritual Pokemon thing that they summon to battle each other, and that's where we're getting all these.
I really didn't enjoy the stand thing when it first was introduced. Like, it took me a long time in Stardust Crusaders to like accept it, because I really liked Hamon, even though it's very simple. By the time we get to part 4, and he starts experimenting more with the stands and making them more interesting, I'm sold. It's a much better storytelling tool than whatever Hamon was. But yeah, I actually used. I think I called him Digimon, but yeah, I used the same analogy.
It's a bit simpler in Stardust Crusaders, where a lot of the stands are sort of these humanoid muscle men that can punch really hard or shoot lasers from their eyes. So like they have some various like a little bit more gimmicky powers. So you can sort of see it there, and the episodes are structured very much like this is where you get like more of this kind of fighting game way of thinking, where every episode they have to travel somewhere to try to thwart or try to find Dio Brando, who's hiding out in the desert somewhere. And there's basically assassins that are being sent after them, and these assassins will have like their own particular stand power. So usually like the thrill of the episode or the drama is created in them trying to figure out how they will defeat this kind of new stand user assassin. Where, like you said, it starts out with more like the standard, okay, now we have like another big guy with muscles, and we're going to put our biggest guy against him, and they'll have to fight it out. And, usually the good guy wins. But as the show progresses, they get a little bit more creative with some of the stance. Not the same way they get in season 4 and 5, but you will have episodes where the assassin basically has some really gimmicky, actually kind of weak stand power, and they have to try to trick the heroes into falling into a trap or something, and they have to use a lot of smarts to get out of it. And I think that's one of the things that I
in
like.
a specific way, or place the heroes in a specific situation where their stand, that's the only place it works, really.
And that's the where these shows become a little bit more like like a detective show, where they have to use a lot more brains to try to figure out how they will come out on top, instead of just showcasing muscle or who has the most willpower, like you will see in some of these, like say something like Dragon Ball Z, for instance, where it's really more about just trying to escalate the power level constantly. I mean, in this show, that's just not the case. They don't rely on power escalation. In fact, as the seasons go on, the characters get weaker, and they have to rely more on like brain power, and not as much on just trying to willing out these sort of superpower, planet smashing spirits and so on.
Yes.
So
Nordheimer, sorry, real quick, brings up that one of the influences Jojo can be seen in is it Alphabusa, Bravo Alphabusa, if the Emperor had a text-to-speech device. I think they use it it's the sound theme for the Emperor's Royal Guards, and they pretty much just stand around oiling themselves all day. That's the joke. So yeah, showing my power level even deeper here.
I mean, when you look at the character in the middle of the photo here, like with Jotaro Joestar, no, I think it's Jotaro Kojin. I mean, that's one of the things I forgot to mention, that all of these characters, they're all called Jojo because they have some name that can be abbreviated to Jojo, like it's Joseph, Jonathan, Jolene, etc., etc.
Joestar is the name.
It's the last name. So, like, the interesting part about this character is he's very much influenced by Clint Eastwood and these Dirty Harry and Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, the kind of Manco, a man with no name character in his temperament and the way that he solves problems. But you can also see
it's very
the
interesting because in that part he basically creates a main character that doesn't really do a lot. Jotaro is the hero of the part, but he usually doesn't do very much. It's usually the other characters that he's created around him as sort of characters that can react to events, and he can keep the cool.
Yeah, I mean, he has very little personality outside of kicking people's ass, and I mean that's pretty much it. Really, it's a very sort of stoic samurai character. If you Google the Wild One, that's a movie with Marlon Brando from the 1950s.
Oh, sorry. What did you want me to Google?
The Wild One. That's the name of the movie.
Oh,
see if you can get the results.
I'll get the image up.
Because that's, it's not mentioned by Araki, but I mean, when I saw some clips from this, if you can enlarge one of these images, I saw some clips from this show. I realized that this had to have been the influence for Jotaro. He seems to have like a lot of the same body language, and I mean the hats there, like this kind of I mean you can see it there in the way pose, that he walks and a lot of these poses. This kind of backward leaning, nonchalant swagger, hyper masculine confidence.
I'm shocked. Here we go. I'm shocked you haven't showed that yet.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a lot of the uniqueness to this artwork, right, and where the memes come from. I mean, we'll go through a table later of all of the memeable moments. I mean, this is one of the memes. It's called "You're Approaching Me," and I mean, you could go on Know Your Meme and see people that have just kind of recreated this with other shows. They use it as a sort of template. Like you have. Like real people who try to like recreate this pose with costumes and stuff. Like this is what makes the show interesting or sort of funny to watch, is that it has so many of these moments that are memeable in a sense that it's very unexpected, it's very stylized, and you remember it. Basically, it's not some sort of throwaway thing where everything just floats into each other. So if you get back to the slides again, I can see if I can recenter where we were. So after Stardust Crusaders, we get into the Diamond is Unbreakable, whereas like now we're in the 90s basically, and this is and we were following like Josuke, that's like this bastard son of Joseph, where he's had this sort of fling on the side. They live in a sort of in a town, and like this show, there's not a lot of globe-trotting. They just stay in the same town trying to track a serial killer.
It's almost it's almost like he's doing it on purpose. Now that we've talked about it, it's like he went through, because Stardust Crusaders is very much a globe-trotting sort of. It's not that globe-trotting, but it's like an adventure in terms of it's a lot of travel. And it's like he went the entirely opposite direction and told himself that, okay, this time I'm gonna build a mystery just using one town.
Yes. Just one more comment on Stardust Crusaders. Like, I strongly believe that, Street Fighter 2, the way it's designed, is try to stolen from or copied from Stardust Crusaders. If you remember, like these kind of character select screens, where like you just pick characters from these various parts of the world, and they all have these superpowers, and they like the airplane flies across the screen. To do this kind of globe-trotting stuff, I have a hard time imagining that they would have come up with that like completely independently of having read it, considering how popular it was. Let's see, anything interesting on part 4? Well, I mean, it hasn't spawned as many memes as part 3. I think part 3 was like the most memeable of them, unless any of you have like a varying opinion.
I enjoyed part 4. I think this is where he starts experimenting a lot more with the stand system, if you can call it that, in terms of as a storytelling tool.
The fights are also
stands that aren't. Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, just a lot more situations that aren't just Jotaro punches something really hard.
Yeah, so I was going to say that I really like how creative the fights get in part 4. It's like a puzzle you have to solve. And that's something I really like about Jojo. It's not just, the fights are short and deadly, and you have to like use your wits to win, and not just the power of friendship or something like that.
Yeah.
Because that's very much contrasting to the Dragon Ball style of doing it, where you have characters that are powering up, and they're powering up and powering up, and they just keep trying to punch each other out until the planet breaks. Where with this, it's like the characters are quite vulnerable, and they can die very easily, and they have to think quickly in terms of how to use the powers creatively. The fun thing about part 4 is that it also has a lot of standalone episodes that just have like no relation to the plot at all. It's just like, here's a fun episode where we have a creative idea.
I'd say in the first half that's true, and I think that's the point.
Yeah, of course they do pick up the pace a little bit with the.
I think
with the latter half there.
I mean, I can't read the mind of the creators here, but I think the point is that you basically use all of the first half of the episodes to build the town, because everything that gets brought up in all of these standalone episodes gets relevant again after sort of the big twist halfway through. And suddenly, someone is chasing someone else, and they're running into, oh, I recognize that building from episode 3. That's where this woman lives, right? So you get a lot of payoffs from that. I think that's the idea. I'm not sure if it's beautifully executed, but that's the idea.
So they also changed the art style here in season 4, where you go from the super sort of He-Man 80s into like this more kind of slender 90s.
Almost
the characters
boy
are
band,
boy band. Yes, perfect.
Let me see if I can bring
anything else.
Images.
Yeah, I can show some images from it.
5 minutes. Can we find?
It's funny because a lot of the characters from season 3 show up here as well, but they like they're skinny now. So
yeah, you can see here Jotaro is quite. He's slimmed down quite a bit, actually.
He did cardio.
But I mean, this is an average Japanese. How old is he? Like 15.
I think he's
or
like
something.
16 or something. I mean, they're always so young in these shows, right? But there is something cool about that. I mean, it's not like this kind of geriatric energy shows. It is very much emphasizing the energy, the youth dynamism.
Yeah, the Yosuke looks so strange. I never really liked his design.
I actually suspect that his look is very influenced of this kind of British teddy boy trend. If you Google the teddy boys, I think you can see some guys with like similar jackets and haircuts.
Yeah. This literally this one.
Top. Yes, it is pretty much that. So I think that's where he got the style.
Interesting.
So that's like the gimmick of this character is basically that he is a nice guy, but he's very touchy about his hairstyle, and he will kill people for like either messing up his hair or insulting the look.
Much more in a sense than Jotaro was. Josuke is a much more, I suppose, standard protagonist in that sense, in that he really cares about his friends, etc. More than Jotaro, who just kind of wanted to punch people in.
Yeah, he is much more kind of functional middle class person, and not like this sort of Clint Eastwood mini version.
Okay.
Alrighty. Then there's part 5. That's I mean, it's called the Vento Aureo, or Golden Wind as it's translated in English, and they went for something different here, where the main character is now like he's not actually in the Joestar bloodline, but he's in the Brando bloodline. That he's supposedly some like the long lost son, or is it grandson of Dio?
Yeah.
Who then is in Italy for some reason. That's where Dio had this sort of side fling, and
what's his name again?
The show is about
Giovanni.
him.
That's how it gets translated to Jojo. Yeah.
The show is about him basically trying to become like the sort of chief mafioso. Like he wants to control the entire mafia in Italy, and he has to like try to get into these mafia gangs and move his way up the ranks to try to outdo the current
theory pilled.
It's very. I mean, that's one of these sort of accidentally based, parts of the show is that he's, one of the first protagonists that's very proactive. Like he's not waiting for something to happen to him. He goes out and tries to just assemble a team, like you see there, of these kind of elite mafia people, and moving them up the ranks to take out the people on top, so that he can control it in the way that he.
Yeah.
Yeah,
all of the Joestars, as you say, wait for something to happen to either them or a family member or something like that, and then.
Yeah, they're like the regular good guy who, oh, you put my family in danger, you threatened my country or something, then they have to step in. But this guy's a lot more proactive. And I mean, this is like elite theory for kids, basically, although the show is not really for kids, because it's quite, a lot of the gore seems to get stepped up a bit in this season.
It really did, yeah.
I mean, a lot of these stands get weaker, but the fights get more technical, almost to a point where, yeah, of course, there's sort of homoeroticism as well in this season that I can't make excuses
a
for
Mediterranean appreciation of the male physique that was lost in the burly Americanisms of the other one.
Yeah, it's just male bonding.
It's just male bonding, guys.
Rough and tumble play, like Jordan Peterson talks about.
No, but even in the show, moments like this are played for laughs. It's not a regular occurrence, I think.
They're not trying to sell you in on like, this is like normal and you should accept it. Like when stuff like this happens, it's considered to be a shock moment or something. It's considered to be gross when that happens, and it's played up in that way.
Or someone is taunting or torturing someone else. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nordanon said that his entire motivation for doing it, I forgot that, is shutting down the drug trade in Naples, I think, which is his local town.
Oh yeah, yeah. Of course,
so
that's even better.
He's going to take over the mafia to stop the drug trade.
It's very elite theory pilled, very kind of high agency thinking.
Okay. Do we want to mention? Is there anything specifically interesting about this one? It did include some of the weirder powers.
they
so
escalated
far.
like the weirdness
Yeah.
of the powers. They escalated the gore, and a lot of like the violence in this one is. It wasn't even surprising even to me watching it. I wasn't ready for like the amount of the kind of mafia violence that's introduced into this and how cruel some of it gets.
Yeah.
But I don't know if there's this. I don't want to. I mean, I could spoil like the first part, but I don't want to sit and like go through every part of this show.
Yeah, but the gore is kind of in a theme for criminal gangs because they have to kind of set an example of people in really gruesome ways to keep the peace. One example is like Mexican drug cartels. They do like horrible things to people as a deterrent because they operate outside the law.
Yeah, it's very Latin American. But I mean, even outside of this kind of the gang war part of it, like they bring in a lot of sadistic characters, like the Green Tea, the doctor character here, who is like this, this kind of disqualified surgeon character who's just a complete sort of sadist in a sense, who likes to torture and mutilate people, and it creates a lot of quite sort of powerful, shocking imagery. See, there's a couple of memes that have spawned from this season as well, but not as many as the as you'd see with the third or the first.
It did include what I was told is an insane amount of pages of Giovanni just punching a guy, because usually every arc has like it ends with the good guy punching the shit out, and I mean punching the shit. This isn't just some animes I've seen, it's a big punch. This is like half a minute of him just wailing on the bad guy, and the longest by far has been in in this part.
Yeah, so they do this. I mean, it's typical building up hateable characters, and then you're allowed to just watch them being punched out for 5 pages. Right, and I mean, this is the second last season that's been run as an anime. The last one, I guess, is the Stone Ocean, which I'm not really that qualified to talk about because I haven't finished it. I mean, maybe Walrus and Jason can fill in the audience.
They've only released like half of it, I think.
Oh, it's not even finished.
No, so we can cover some of it, but from here on out, it's Jason really. So you got to try to keep it a bit spoiler free as well. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I read the manga, but it's a long time ago, so I'm weak on the details.
The premise here is that this is is she the daughter of Jotaro from part 3?
That much I've picked up. Yeah, she is the daughter of Jotaro. That's the part 3 protagonist, and she's in prison for some reason.
She doesn't know it, I think. And she's a bit of a delinquent, and she's been putting like what seems to be an escape from LA jail, or maybe it's just normal Florida jail, because I think this is where it takes place in Florida. It's this very strange Mad Maxy kind of jail. And at the time this happens, she awakens to her stand powers. Her father comes to her because of something important, reveals that he's her father, and gets basically his soul stolen by a guy who uses old like 90s discs. So she has to, while staying inside the jail and playing sort of the politics and dealing with the guards, etc., try to hunt down whoever is keeping her dad in stasis. I think that's the premise. So again, we're back to, like, we went from a traveling story back to a enclosed space story, but now it's even more enclosed than it was in part 4, which I think is interesting.
With the last 2 parts, the animes have not been made yet, and I've not read the manga. I've only gotten like a short synopsis of the Steel Ball run and the what is the absolute last one? The Jojo or something?
Yeah.
And these basically happen in separate universes. So now it's just like completely broken off from the original kind of family bloodline stories to
really?
try to look into like completely different ways of telling stories and other arcs. But let's get back to the presentation.
I mean, the big change here is that the main characters go from all men to all women, basically. Part 4 did have some women characters who played larger roles, and so did Part 3, etc. But
Yeah,
all the main characters here are mostly women, as you know, it's a women's prison.
We talked about this in the previous stream, where, like you said, you like the way that Araki draws women, is that he will, because of most of the seasons prior to this one, it's basically all male protagonists. There's very few female protagonists, and if they are, they're not going to be directly involved with violence. Very rarely, unless you have some side character, some type of assassin. Are you muted, Walrus? Were you trying to read the
I was
comment?
reading it. Could you expand on what you mean by enclosed space story? Nordan pretty much said it, but it means it just takes place in a single location. Now, of course, depending on the size, that location can be quite large, but I was just drawing a parallel between the seasons or parts or whatever you want to call it, where Part 3 is a traveling story, Part 4 takes place in one town, Part 5 is a traveling story yet again, and Part 6 takes place in one place, and now that place is even smaller. It seems that the author maybe is challenging himself a bit and constraining himself to force himself to create interesting scenarios within the space he has given him.
Yeah, but eventually they do break out of the prison. Spoiler, sorry, and it becomes kind of like a travel thing again.
I've heard that, yes. So I'm interested in seeing how that goes. But maybe he's trying to marry sort of experiences he had writing Part 4 with experiences he had writing Part 5 and joining them into a combination in Part 6. Maybe I'm just talking out of my ass. LC says, but it means things beyond that, doesn't it? Like in the BAP sense of in a close place. Yes, but that's not the way I was using the word. I was just talking about where the story takes place.
Yes,
okay.
But just following up on the Whammons point here, I mean, previous to this, there's not been any real female protagonists, and Araki has basically said that he doesn't do this on purpose. I mean, you would think that he has some based view of gender relations if you watch the show up to this point, but he basically says that when it comes to creating these heroes, it doesn't really matter if if they're male or female. They're going to be created in kind of the same style. They're going to have the same the personality and the type of priorities the heroes will have. It's not going to be signicantly impacted by sex or gender. But I don't know if you, Jason, if you can confirm that.
Well, Jolene is not. Well, she is like a woman, of course, but she doesn't really act like a woman. I mean, she is basically. You could replace him with a guy and have the exact same personality, and it would be almost no difference.
Yes.
So
what I was getting at.
Yeah, but having this female prison is a great excuse to have an all female cast with really delinquent personalities, because it makes sense that they are kind of unusual.
Yes.
Yeah. So, but I think Jolene has been accused to be this feminist trope. What's it called? A woman who's actually a man or something. I don't remember.
Maybe. I think it's a case of an artist sort of going where the story takes him and people reading a bit too much into it, really.
I mean, for the Western audiences, that's going to be huge, right? That they're going to have, they have gender on the brain.
Going off about this lately about in One Piece, because she's the one who sort of dragged me into it. So she's more interested in it than I am. But it was a character introduced recently and in the latest piece called Yamato, I think, who is the daughter of a powerful person. I'm going to keep it, spoiler free, I guess. Who this powerful person always wanted a son, so he's always called her for his son and treated her like a boy. And so as a result, she's become kind of fucked up and sort of adopted the personality of another person, like a man, like a legend. So it's like I'm the man with no name, literally. To bring it back to the Jotaro thing, if Jotaro said, "I'm the man with no name from Fistful of Dollars," and for some reason, my wife has come across a lot of people saying this is a huge like trans win because she thinks she's a man. And I'm thinking like, yeah, fucked up family situation and mental instability. Great job, guys. You did it.
Well, I mean,
really describes
in the West,
the transsexual community.
In the West, the exposure that you would get to like transgenderism would be in horror films, basically in the 80s and prior to that, whether it's like Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho or some of these other stories. I think it's not The Conjuring, maybe it's Insidious or something where they have like one as a girl, and I think it's great fodder for horror films. I've always thought this it's the most natural kind of horror motif. Aside from like the regular sort of ghost story, but like the sort of
Yeah.
I look at it as like abusing children, basically. It's a little bit like the movie Antichrist, if you've seen it, the Lars von Trier film, where they have like child abuse as a sort of motif. But it's the same with some of these horror stories, where it's like you've kind of raised a man as a woman, and he's sort of taking that out by slashing up people.
Yeah.
But of course, you see it with the trans community, the sort of LGBT community, that they've taken a lot of these horror characters, like Pennywise from It and stuff, as mascots, right? Because they just have to kind of embrace that stuff. But
it's so weird because it's like you're literally identifying with the bad guys, and I'm just sitting here thinking, I thought you were supposed to not like them. I think to go back a couple of minutes to what we were talking about, if I think about it, you're looking at season 3, if someone like Jotaro was a woman, that wouldn't quite mesh in terms of the believability, not necessarily of the character, but their place in the world. Jotaro is introduced as this, first of all, massive dude who is a bit of a bully, who like punches people and doesn't really care about anyone, and will basically steal your lunch money. And if that was a woman, I think the suspension of disbelief would have to be greater.
Yeah, exceptionally.
I'm not saying it's explicitly done that way, but I think, there's a reason he's a man from the perspective of the artist. And I think that's what I'm saying when, he just follows where the story takes him. And if it's a man, it's a man. If it's a woman, it's a woman. It's what's appropriate for the art he wanted to make.
Well, I think at least with Jojo, he is like the most archetypal, quote unquote, kind of autistic male character. It would just be almost impossible to imagine him as a woman. Maybe a little bit easier with some of the other, protagonists.
Even though in Stone Ocean, you'll see Jolene sort of taking from her dad at times. But it makes more sense that she's the daughter of him, and she landed herself in a prison for delinquents, right? For youths. And as Nordanon says, it also makes sense that they're weird because it all takes place in Florida, which we can all agree is on a different wavelength than the rest of the world.
Jojo Florida Man. That's the that should be a good stand name or something. The Florida Menu. All right. But let's get back to the presentation. I think I at least think we've done a job now at kind of explaining what the show is about and how to think about it. I don't know if there's anything we missed, but The next point I'd like to go into is a little bit on Araki's kind of storytelling, or like his philosophy on how to write these stories. Can you get the presentation back up?
Yeah, sorry.
Let's see, and if you just slide it. So there we go. I mean, in 2017, Araki wrote this book that's called Manga in Theory and Practice, which of course I haven't read. I've just looked at the synopsis, but I think that's enough to get a little bit of useful information out of it. I mean, it's called Manga in Theory and Practice, but it could be kind of applied very broadly in terms of an artistic philosophy, where it says that you need to have kind of 4 fundamentals in telling one of these visual stories, and it's characters, story, setting, and theme. And I mean, Araki's philosophy is that he's basically like a character supremacist. He says that, I mean, you can have a good story, or you could have an interesting setting, or the themes that are cool, but if you don't have cool characters, it all falls apart. Like, this is the one thing that you have to make the story work, is to have good, interesting characters. If you have that, then you can sort of save, you have a good story, you get viewers, you can create something interesting. And all of the other things, they can't stand on their own. And I really tried to sort of, as a devil's advocate, try to disprove it, but I kind of struggled actually with finding any media-related thing that has, let's say, like a good story, but the characters are bad, or like it has like a good setting and the characters are bad. I mean, I can think of it in the inverse direction with good characters and a lame story, but this is kind of how it's set up. So with the characters, I mean, this is like a very Japanese thing, where Araki will basically create these extremely elaborate character sheets where you fill in every little tiny detail about the character, from like the blood type, which is very important in Japanese culture, to something like the parents' history, psychological profile, like the voice tone, the education level, the childhood experiences, motivations. It's like this super detailed sheet. And in the stories, there's going to be maybe just like a minimum of those things will be explicitly revealed. But the idea is that, the character's actions will be determined by all of the information on the sheet. And if there's some doubt in terms of how a character would act in specific situations, like, you have to reconsult the character sheet and just make sure, okay, the character stays consistent within what is on the sheet. And that way you can get like a better immersive experience on what you're watching. Of course, the uniqueness of these characters is very important. It's sort of how you as a viewer can remember them. Is that you need to contrast these characters against each other, and so there's a lot of emphasis on designing characters that look unique and that can be differentiated from each other. Let's say in terms of like whether it's the superpowers that they have, or some type of the hairstyle, like we talked about, the hat, they wear badges in JoJo's, like they will have like the heart badge or like the star or something. So there's that's like one of the the most emphasized parts of it, whereas the story becomes a little bit more secondary, but as you see, it's still sort of emphasized in the fact that it's switched up and the settings are switched up, and the sort of, well, I guess that's kind of the summarizing it. Walrus, I remember, like, you talked about playing Dark Souls, and this is I mean, one of the things that I think From Software does as well is that they have these really elaborate sheets of stats and history on all of these characters, and it's that like there's very little that's actually revealed in the story, but it still has to be consistent with all of this kind of like hidden lore stuff that they keep at the sort of FromSoft HQ, and all these YouTubers so basically have to sit and dig up the story. So
Yeah.
I don't know if you have any opinion on that.
Well, it's part of the expression, isn't it? But I'm not sure if it's the same thing. That's an interesting question. No, sorry, I got nothing.
Yeah, I don't know if like the Western kind of if these Western artists do it the same way.
Sorry,
because it seems like a very
Yeah, so the way that with Dark Souls, I think if I remember correctly, the man, sort of the game director behind it, he had a fascination with a lot of English fantasy literature growing up, and he didn't read very well English, of course. So his way of learning about either history from Europe or fantasy from Europe was sort of piecemeal, where he'd understand part of it and then understand something else and have to sort of piece things together with context clues as he learned more of the language. And that's something he wanted to replicate in the story, I suppose, lore, and not the story of the game, when they made Demon Souls and later Dark Souls.
Interesting. I didn't actually know that. But I think that's sort of a good, if you're going to take anything from this, and I mean, this was a kind of new approach to me as well, that if you're going to write some kind of fictional story, you just create characters that are sort of unique and can bounce off each other, and then you write like very detailed, explanations of how they, of their personalities and all of their stats, and you just make sure that there's a story that's kind of remains consistent within that, because I see a lot of the things that are done the other way around, where people just have an idea for a story and they just keep sort of inserting characters into it, and the characters just have to do whatever the story demands of them. That's where you get these jump the shark moments, and a lot of these, like the recent people get angry with Game of Thrones, for instance, where they talk about the latter seasons where, all these characters did stuff that was sort of out of character for them. And like it comes back
they
to this stuff.
They don't have the character sheets, yeah.
No, they didn't have the sheets. George R. R. Martin didn't bring them the sheets, so they end up messing up the story, and it takes people out of the experience, right? But I think that's kind of covers the basis on the design philosophy. So now,
but
I think
it is also a skill to be able to craft interesting characters to that level, and then it pays off because there's a lot of pre-work. But once you have a solid roster, you can pretty much just continue churning out situations, problems, crossovers, I suppose, and create enjoyable situations and concepts out of it.
Yes.
Just place them in different stuff.
Exactly. So let's see. But I mean, this is something that we've covered already, where we talked about like what's good about it, and I put this Twitter post in here from Flight Astral, where he says everything you thought was cool when you were 12 is what is actually cool. Arnold, war, metal, huge boobs, all of it, and that's kind of how I feel about JoJo's when we were talking about the kind of, okay, it's just a shonen anime, and it maintains the purity of. That kind of just, okay, the 12-year-old boy fantasy of just punching out the bad guy. Basically, you solve the problem with violence and you take all the power, and that's like, okay, it's a boy's fantasy, but when you become an adult, you realize that, okay, that's how power is actually transferred in the real world as well. So the Western influence, I guess, is what makes it interesting, and this is, of course, true with all of anime that's made after 1945, that it's all sort of like just taking Western influence, selling it back to a Western audience. But the types of Western influences that we've covered, like Clint Eastwood, the good, the bad, and the ugly of Dirty Harry, these types of characters and storylines, that's cool. The lack of kind of progressiveness in the show. I mean, I can't really think of much. Can you think of anything, Walrus or Jason, of sort of like progressive, sneaky stuff that's like crept into JoJo's?
JoJo specifically, I'm not sure. What do you think, Jason?
Yeah, not really. I read the last season, the manga, and I didn't really pick up any woke things there.
Yeah, that's good, because I've not read the latest one. So of course that's where you think it would have crept in, right? The Japanese would have picked up on that stuff. Yeah. Yes. I mean, the craft part we've covered about specialization and dedicating yourself to doing one thing for 40 years, and like the type of skill that you get from that. I mean, it's really the same thing like with Japanese, video games. If you're like familiar with the Silent Hill series, that's made by Konami, it's sort of an example of that. Where people will sort of praise the first like 3-4 games in that series, and afterwards the intellectual property rights are just kind of sold to a Western studio, where they just hire in. It's typical. They just hire in some kind of Polish, Lithuanian game studio that can do it on the cheap. And in spite of being made like 15-20 years later, it looks uglier. Like with newer technology, it manages to just look worse than Japanese people who are doing it 15 years prior with shittier tech.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like where you really see the kind of what you get out of this hyper specialization.
But even in the West, I mean, talking about animation, just looking at older Western animation as well, the detail compared to modern 3D animation you can't compare it, right? It's so much better. Even something like the modern stuff, it's pretty colors and all that, but there's some craft, to use a word, that's been lost in the post Shrek era of Western animation.
I mean, it is like this with anime as well.
Yeah, I was about to say that anime was really high quality in the 70s and 80s, and I think it's become like this really standardized, lower quality to cut costs. Basically,
I think it's also because they've gone from doing this kind of hand drawn, frame type style to using more computer animation, and that's where you see, like, say, with the new Berserk and the stuff. There's a lot of kinetic action that they're able to do, but the emphasis on like harmony and doing like, let's say you have a limited budget and it's hard. You have to hand draw everything. You have to really think about what you're showing and what you're not showing. And now it's just so easy to make this kind of like throwaway action that they just put it everywhere, and it just becomes like very noisy.
It's a tool like everything else, right? And you have to use it with caution. And I think something that you will probably see is that you'll be using computerized aid in animation. There probably already are to draw a lot of in-between frames, as they're called. Things that usually take a lot of time, that is more busy work, quote unquote, where you have to, say you're moving a hand and you want it to go from point A to point B, you have to draw all of the in-between frames where it moves from point A to point B. You can computerize some of that production, but you can keep the agency of the creator. What you lose with a lot of 3D animation is that you usually create what's called a rig, where you give, in air quotes, bones to the 3D model, and then you can, more and more often these days, simulate the effects upon that body. So with something that's called, I'm skipping over hours and hours of concepts here, but with something called, inverse kinematics, if you move a character's hand, if you move your hand upwards, you can see that your joints on your elbow and your shoulder is also moving along with it, because you can't just move your hand up into the air. You have to do some kind of combination movement. So inverse kinematics will allow you to automate that. The problem is that, well, now you're just telling a computer, I want this character's hand to move, and then everything else is a computerized action. You lose the artist's agency in it, because the only thing that the artist can do is say, well, I want this hand to move, and then they don't have any control over everything else.
And it becomes very standardized.
That's exactly how. Yeah, I'm not saying that's exactly how they do it, but I think that's the way it's heading.
Standardization and kind of flattening out. It's similar with music as well, where everybody's using the same kind of recording kit, and like when you listen to metal and stuff, like a lot of the guitars just sound the same because they're all using the same like Pro Tools and that stuff. But I think we're getting way off now. So finishing up, like one of the last base thing that I wanted to mention here, and that's sort of a part of Araki's, philosophy on writing fiction, is that the hero has to fight by himself. basically, and that's what a lot of JoJo is built around. That you have to have the hero that's able to show agency, courage, and be able to do the fight by himself and take the risks by himself. And if that's not present in the story, then it's not going to be a relatable hero. And of course, I mean, there's a lot of debates back and forth in the DR against the individualism contra collectivism and so on. And you have certain animes, like a stupid example, let's say Digimon, for instance, where it's really more about emphasizing cooperation and teamwork. Whereas in this show, it's more about like the sort of heroic individual that is going to stand against the odds.
Yeah, JoJo really has that sort of, you have to grab victory from the jaws of the dragon.
And communicate it extremely effectively.
Yeah.
Right. So I think in the next slide we could look at some of the cultural influences. It's just to kind of link to the JoJo Wikipedia here. So
yep,
this is one of the things that I mentioned, but every character in this show is a reference to some rock band or some musical artist. And that's the thing that's kind of, it's very much in line with this kind of shonen young boy fantasy thing, where it's like, if you remember being a young boy and you had to make up some fiction or write a story for your class, or you play a game or something and you have to make up characters and give them names, and you just give them names from like, this character is Michael Jackson and this character is Eminem or whatever. You just take whatever you've been listening to, because you can't make stuff up in a very convincing way. It's just always very obvious that you're stealing it from somewhere else. And like here you can start to just look at, this is just season 1, where every Beatles songs here, like Dio is a reference to Ronald James Dio, where the last name is like Marlon Brando's reference. So you see the Led Zeppelin references here, Tom Petty, Queen, Dire Straits, Emerson, Palmer. And like I didn't think it was that widespread, but it is apparently like every single character is like some reference to a song or a band or some film that exists in the Western. I mean, even this one you see under film there, it's like they used the reference to David Cronenberg.
Stephen King.
So it is a kind of fun game while you're watching this this show. It's like how many references you could pick up to Western canon. And it's also kind of
are named after, let's see, Santana, Wamu, AC/DC, and Cars, which is obviously Santana, Wham, AC/DC, and the Cars.
And of course, because of copyright, they have to change the names a little bit.
Yes. There's a guy in part 4 who's also called like AC/DC or something like that, isn't it? Hang on, let me see if I can scroll down here. Oh god, there's a lot of references. A lot more than I remembered. Let's see. The LOGH? No.
You mean the electric guy?
Yeah, the electric guy.
It's a lot of characters in season 4.
Yeah, there is. Whatever.
Yeah, the fans can find that out there. They can go look at this. This site for themselves.
There's apparently a lot more than I thought, but yeah. I remember watching it because some of the versions I watched in the translation they changed the name, probably for copyright reasons.
Yeah, they do.
And it was always fun trying to. Yeah, it was always fun trying to figure out. Wait, hang on a minute. What is this actually referencing? Whoops.
So right, if we go back to the slides, so for the last slide, I just put up a kind of reference sheet on some of the memes that I think have spawned. And if you, you could look at some of these, like say from Phantom Blood there, the To Be Continued. I think that's one of like the funnier,
that is, one of the more
funnier
obvious
ones for these meme compilations.
Jojo really... meme review.
See, can you get up the clip? You have to sign in, Dan.
Okay, I'm gonna hang on.
Maybe you could just search on like GGBA To Be Continued or something in the search field. So see if you can find one that doesn't have this.
I'm just gonna put meme.
Yep.
This is a 5-minute compilation. Okay, we'll just watch.
Just watch a minute or something.
Okay.
So why didn't I flinch? Because the laws of science.
Oh, what happened? Sorry.
Why didn't I flinch? Because the laws of science differ fundamentally.
I wasn't expecting it to be like an edit where it actually hit him in the face. So yeah,
this isn't like the first season
Mm.
where every episode is ended with this kind of yes roundabout song.
Yeah.
And you know, not only it's the show is kind of a good reference for, you know, finding cool, you know, classic rock bands, but they will play a lot of the songs in the show as well.
Yeah.
So if you look at some of the other memes that are cool. So yeah, the menacing scene here.
The spoon. Yeah, these like I suppose these are like what's it called? The words that mimic sound. Onomatopoeia.
Yeah, help
or
us,
something.
Mason. Do you know what they are?
No, sorry. Kanji? No.
Maybe.
Maybe some experts in the comment section can help us out.
Let's see, what other memes do we have here? Stealing a kiss, Thundercross. Stealing a kiss, that's the one It Was Me Dio thing, isn't it?
Yeah. Yes.
This is a very, very popular one. This was everywhere. Oh, this is very long. Okay, so...
落ち込んでるはずのあいつがやったさすがディオ俺たちにできないことを平然とやってのけるそこに
Oh, sorry, it's like moving the
だったのかさすがディオ俺たちにできないことを平然とやってのけるそこにしびれる憧れる君もうジョジョとキスはしたのかいまだだよな初めての相手はジョジョではないこのディオだ
The voice actor for that guy is probably one of the better choices they made. He manages to be like menacing and smug at the same time. Oh, we gotta look at the Pillar Men. This is from part 2.
Yeah, the Stroheim one, I think.
Oh, that song is crisp. I just love how overboard he goes with the sort of the posing in part 2. German engineering. Oh yeah, that's the German machine man.
It's the Ubermensch Stroheim.
Yeah. Let's see here. Yeah, here's the thing I'm talking about where they just like punch people like a minute straight. Just fucking goes at him, I guess. I think this just keeps going, yeah. Like 30 seconds. So that's a meme. Oh god, the world card, which is something we didn't mention about part 3, where every like stand is associated with a what's it
Tarot
called?
Card.
Tarot card, yeah. Alright, I guess we did. And he has the world, so the way he like yells in like broken Japanese English, Zawarudo. Oh, no. Don't I have ad block on? I thought I had ad block on. Why am I getting ads? Alright, let's find another one. You have the oh, you're approaching me thing. We looked at that already. What is this? All right, but I think the point stands that this is very memeable for enterprising young internet man.
Yeah, they made a lot of these with the Goal Experience Requiem.
Yeah.
Right. I think we've covered the basis on Jojo quite well, so I'm ready for Legend of Galactic Heroes.
Yeah, I think we should. Hang on. Let me see if I can pull this up. We talked about this before, Luddic. I was unsure whether I could pull it off or if I should. But I did manage to get it going. I've got something for everyone in the chat. And we're going to rebrand the entire channel. We're no longer going to be talking about politics from now on. I'm just going to play video games and eat food because I have acquired a new avatar. Let me see. Oh, that did not work. Give me a moment. There we go. Hello, it is me, Dio from Jojo's Bizarre Adventure.
Oh shit, it's Dio, guys. Oh yeah, this is
here.
a VTuber channel now.
This is a VTuber channel now. You guys can subscribe down below, like the video, and leave a comment if you want more of this bullshit. All right. I like messing about with tech when I can. But this is the unspeakable horrors that modern life
Richard
brings to
Nordheim
us.
had a cool request here. What does to do like mukbang?
You can do a mukbang of oh
sod.
God, no.
And that's gonna be that's for the subscribe star. We're gonna have to do like eating videos. Okay, I mean, do you have the let's say Legend of Galactic Heroes?
Sorry, I had some technical difficulties turning off the the model. No, we don't like VTubers. I just sometimes I like to play with tech, and this was the result, and I'm never going to bring it back again, I promise. But Liner95 has the right idea. It's the Toon Man, I must give money. I was saying we could maybe we need to do like eating the sheephead, the smalahove, as well then.
Yes,
for the mukbangs.
That would be good content, actually.
Lopskaus isn't a mukbang, that's just dinner. There's nothing special about it. Speaking of mukbangs, before we start on Legend of the Galactic Heroes, I'm gonna shill the hell out of a book. I'm gonna shill the hell out of Unsqualified Preservations by Mencius Mulbug Man, who have collected a lot of his works over the years and placed them in this book. So it's a lot of short stories. I hesitate to use to compare it to something like that, but my thought after reading a couple was this is Black Mirror if it was good, in book form. But it's also important to help out right-wing creators. We talk about how the right doesn't create a lot of art. Well, it does. You just have to look a little bit harder and actually support them when you find them. So you should buy this book. It's $21 if you buy it, and I think it's a pocket format, but I bought it in ebook edition, which is only $9.99. Highly recommended. It's not necessarily a horror themed collection. It's more that we live in the horror story presently, and he's just holding up a mirror. So please consider buying the book. I at least recommend it. And we're probably gonna do a review of it at some point. This is not Yarvin's spoof. It's just he's just using the moniker, and it's spoofing the unqualified reservations. But the contents are just various short stories or novellas, I suppose, of either humorous or creepy observations of our current world. All right, Jason, the floor is yours. Tell us about Legend of the Galactic Heroes.
Okay. Yes, so Legend of the Galactic Heroes. It's a space opera that is based on our universe. So the Earth exists in the universe. At some point, humanity discovered interstellar travel, and then 800 years into the future, the plot takes place. There are no aliens; there are only humans in the universe. A lot of the characters look and dress normal with normal haircuts, which if you compare to like other animes, they look normal, which I like. I also discovered recently that they recently made a remake of Legend of Galactic Heroes, and I think they kind of missed the point completely, and it looks like every character looks like this homoerotic gay. It looks really gay, basically. So I'm only going to talk about the 80s version, the based version. There's tons of characters and there's tons of lore, and it's a huge universe. So it's really difficult to talk about, but I will try my best.
Hang on. Sorry to interrupt. I saw someone in the chat ask if that's Jordan Peterson in the background there on the middle right in the background.
The middle right?
Yes, right next to the C in Galactic.
When you notice it, when you see it, he cleaned his room all the way out in space. So
yeah.
sorry, go on. No, this is actually Dave Rubin's gay adopted, gay surrogate son that's made with Peterson's DNA into the future. Just for lore clarification.
Yeah, so one of the things that you will immediately notice when you look at, this really diverse cast of characters, you will notice that they at some point in the future discovered a cure for male pattern baldness. That's clear. And that was a joke.
Yeah. Sorry, I was muted. Yeah.
And every single character is like old and male, and that's really unusual for anime, mostly because of voice acting costs. Because if you have like a lot of women and a lot of young characters, you can have like these 1 or 2 female voice actors, and they can voice like everything. But for male voice acting, you need like a different person for several of the characters. So it was probably extremely expensive to make, and they're not going to make anything like this again, because it's just a lot cheaper and easier to make, more profitable to just have a lot of 15-year-old boys and a lot of anime women, because you can have like 2 voice actors. And so that's something that makes this really unique. So there are tons of characters, but the main characters is Reinhard, the guy on the bottom left, and Yang Wenli, the guy on the bottom right. And yeah, I think that's a good enough for introduction. We can go to the
Then I
next
assume you mean
slide.
the bottom
Yeah.
in the center, right?
Yeah,
The
center. Yeah,
Oh,
the
okay,
blonde guy.
yeah.
Yeah, the blonde guy is Reinhard. He's the main character, and then right next to him, Yang.
He looks
they're
very
kind of-
based. Maybe he isn't. Richard Nordheimer in the chat asks, is this the one where the scene of a historian talks about how the USA went full degeneracy and collapsed?
Yes.
Okay.
There's like I think the author has a really, I think he probably studied history, because there's a lot of historians and a lot of sequences in this show where you have like an historian talking about the history of the Earth for like several hundreds of years, and there's so much lore. So I will go more into it, but Earth exists, and at some point there was like a nuclear war, and every single major city is like nuked, and then they discovered interstellar travel and spread out into the universe. But there's like a lot of history and a lot of lore.
Right.
So and go to the next slide. So I'm just going to start with just a map of the universe. So there are three major factions. There are more factions, but I will stick to those three. The Alliance, which holds to the Free Planets Alliance, who holds to the left. And their main capital planet is Planet Heinesen. You see it's hard to read, but it's to the left there. And then to the right, you have the Empire control space, and their capital planet is Planet Odin. And then you have Fasan, which is like a merchant planet, who is they're independent, but they're technically part of the Empire. But they're the fact that they are independent, they can kind of act like a middleman for trade between the Alliance and the Empire. And I don't know how space travel works, but for some reason, the only way to get from Empire space to Alliance space, you have to pass through one of the two corridors in the middle. So you see the fortress Isrelon and Fesan Land. Like the only way, it's a really narrow corridor where you have to pass through, and it's the only way to go from Alliance space to Empire space. And
I see.
I'm not sure how that works, but
is this like warring civilizations or?
Yeah. So I was getting to that. So so the Empire and the Free Planets Alliance is at war. Should probably mention that before I talked about the corridors. But it battle becomes really difficult because they have to pass through this narrow corridor. So it becomes like this choke points. The fortress Isolon is like a fortress, like a Death Star almost, which is controlled by the Empire, and so it's basically impossible for the Alliance to invade the Empire without taking over the fortress. So you have the Empire and the Alliance. I will start with just an overview of the Empire. So I don't know much about Prussia, but apparently the Empire is based on Prussia.
I could almost see it in the uniforms.
Yeah. So and there's a lot of Germanic names and culture, and they all also believe in the god Odin. Their planet's even named after Odin, and they believe the soldiers believe that if they die in combat, they go to Valhalla. So there's like some cool mix of Prussia and Norse stuff going on there. And the founder of the Empire, which is like an absolute monarchy, is Rudolf von Goldenbaum. So in the long ago, in the lore of the show, he was a soldier, accomplished soldier who turned politician. He became insanely powerful and popular, and he got to a point where he was so popular and he had so much influence and power that he just took power basically and just turned it into absolute monarchy, and he reset the calendar. So this is the imperial calendar, year 0. It starts with me, and this is and something about the Empire which I didn't pick up on the first time I watched it, but I rewatched it like a week ago, like season 1 and season 2, to refresh my memory. And they so when Goldenbaum took power, he established himself as an emperor, and he created an aristocratic class of nobles and high nobles who are like the elite, and they hold like special privileges and power. And he made sure that every single one of them were white and of Germanic descent. And and like in the anime, there's like this narrator who like goes through the history of the Empire, and it just states, you know, that sentence word for word, and then it just like completely neutral, no condemning, and just goes on to something completely. I had to do a double take almost and like go back.
I was going to say, when you mentioned it, Milana 95 says restart the calendar, true Caesarian energy. Yes.
Yeah, so in the Empire, you mostly see soldiers, nobles, high nobles, and like the royalty. You don't really see any of the regular citizens.
Great man pilled. Yes.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, so so you get the impression that the Empire is like this. It's only white and Germanic, basically. That's the impression you get. But based on what Goldenbaum did, it makes sense that that's not true. But they're just, you know, on other planets living in the lower class.
I'm saying. The machinations of the Empire doesn't. The story doesn't care what happens to the people who are not in power, so you never see them.
Yeah, and that brings back to something I really like about the show, and that is the show doesn't preach at all. It has like no side to sell you, and it just it presents like views and opinions through characters. So when the narrator in the anime explains the Empire, it has no need to like provide extra context, you know, and say this is bad. It just says that, you know, this is what he did and this is what the Empire is. And you have characters in the show, obviously you have opinions and perspectives, but it feels more realistic that like views and perspectives and opinions are you see it through characters in the world and not the universe itself, if that makes sense. And so at the point when in the first episode, the Goldenbaum dynasty has lasted for 500 years, and the current emperor is a descendant of Goldenbaum. Now he has like basically no ambition at all. He just wants to live in like decadence, and he has an harem. He delegates all power to a prime minister. So he's kind of the guy.
Which one of these guys were that?
So the guy with the fancy, you see the woman to the left of the blonde woman in the middle.
Yeah. Oh, the gray-haired man.
The gray-haired man. Yeah. So he's the current emperor, and so the Goldenbaum dynasty has lasted for like 500 years, and all power is inherited, right? So when one Goldenbaum die, there's like in line for the throne in a sense. So you have all these kids who are in line for the throne, and they're fighting for power and killing each other, and so that's been going on for like 500 years. And the current emperor, he has no ambition. He just wants to read poetry and just have fun. But he was like one of two brothers who were really ambitious, and one brother framed the one brother for trying to like kill the current emperor, and he was like executed for his treachery. And then it was revealed that he was framed, and then the other guy was killed, and then he was like the only guy left. So he kind of just ended up in that position. So that's kind of the state of the Empire, where it's kind of like in decay a little bit, and you have these nobles and high nobles who are trying to hold on to power.
Right.
And that's basically the Empire. And then you have the Free Planets Alliance. So The Free Planets Alliance was founded by Arle Heinesen. And basically 100 years, I think, into the empire, he and people who followed him fled the empire through the Eastern Long Corridor into unknown space, and they found planet Heinesen, and they settled there, and they founded like a new nation based on representative democracy, and it basically reminds you a lot of the just America and the West. If you go back to the first slide again.
Yes. Just a moment. There we go.
You see it in the uniforms that they look like military from the US, kind of. So that's kind of what
they have. The berets and
yeah. And if you go back to the second slide. So
actually, they're a bit more British in their uniforms, aren't they? I'm not like an expert on.
Okay, just anyway. Sorry, just stay on that slide. So the thing I need to bring up about the Free Planets Alliance is so while in the Empire they're like everyone is white and Germanic descent, in the Free Planets Alliance there's a lot more. They're more diverse. At least it looks like it. You don't see it on this picture, but there's a lot of people who are from different cultures, like India, Arabia, etc. But it looks like it's like 80% white when you look at the show. But it's really confusing because I think like all of the Asians look white. So you see Yang, he's white. Now he's Asian. He has an Asian name, but he looks white. So there's like the people of the Free Planets Alliance, they're like several years into the future with interstellar travel. So all the people of the Earth are like combined together. So there's probably like a mix of whites and Asians, etc. But in the anime, I mean, for some reason, when Japanese people make anime and they make these Asian characters, they look white. So I can't tell the difference at all. When you look at Yang, the guy in the middle to the right, he just looks white.
Yeah.
So yeah. Okay, so you can go back to second. So the Empire and the Free Planet Alliance are fighting, and from the very beginning, you see that the Free Planets Alliance doesn't stand a chance against the Empire, because it's just the Empire is like this warrior society, and they have these really it's just a more efficient government for making decisions, while the Empire, you have these politicians with representative democracy, and the politicians are concerned about getting reelected, kind of, and they make military decisions based on election cycles and not whether is this the correct time to attack or do something. So you get this from the very beginning. The Free Planets Alliance have no chance. Maybe they can like get a draw and then get a peace agreement or something, but they really have like no chance. So there's like this really throughout the entire anime, there's like this. It's not an equal battle. It's like the Free Planets Alliance is always on the losing end. And then you have Fesan, which is really interesting because they're like kind of this third party who has their own motivations, because they are part of the Empire, but they are like independent, and they can act like a middleman between the Alliance and the Empire for trade. So from their perspective, they're like in this extremely profitable position where they kind of want the Alliance and the Empire to fight forever. Then they don't want them. They don't want them to achieve at some sort of peace. They don't want one side to win. They want them to fight forever. From their perspective, because that's in their interest. They're like this really merchant libertarian planet where like it's almost the god is profit almost.
Right.
And
I wonder what that reminds you of.
Yeah, it's really strange. So So they're really interesting, but to like I will get back to them because they make the plot really really interesting. But I have to cover so many more things before I get to them. But just know that they're like this third party, and they have an interest in the Empire and the Alliance fighting, and they also have so much money, obviously, and so they give out really big loans to both the Empire and the Alliance, and so when you have this war economy, it's just they're in this really good spot. So they want whatever this is to continue, basically. So there are more factions. There's like this cult on the planet Earth of these. Yeah, there's so many factions, but just too much for. So I will just skip them for now, and. Okay. Then you can go to the next slide. So now we're just going to like talk a little about the structure of the anime, like how the show, what the show's about from like mechanical perspective. So you have like these huge space battles with like millions of soldiers on each side. The first battle in the first episode, you have like 5 million soldiers on one side. And like 4 million on the other side. So there's like, and you have like all, if you see like in the top right, there's like ships as far as the eye can see. And at the bottom right picture, there's a flagship of Reinhard, and each light in the background is a ship in formation. So the battles are like huge. It's like, yeah, the scope is insane. So a big part of the show is this huge space battles, and because of the scale, the focus is really on strategy and tactics. It's like so getting information, because just getting into information takes time. It takes like 30 minutes to get into information, and then it takes like an hour to do the thing that you want to do. And the enemy sees that you're getting into information to do something, and they might see what you're doing, but they can't respond in time. So
it's
the
a bit
battles
more analogous to older, marine battles, really. And
yeah. So
the modern sci-fi, which is just everyone's zooming all over the place.
Yeah. So the battles play out like a game of 3D chess, because in space it's like it's 3 dimensions. So Alliance makes a move, the Empire makes a move, and so on. And I think this really works well. I love this part of the show, especially because it puts the emphasis on strategy and tactics. And because this really bothers me in like other shows, let's say a Game of Thrones, the big battles there, I want to just punch the screen almost. I don't know if you've seen some of the battles where people just run into each other, but 2 armies just run into each other, and there's like these jump cuts of people like hitting. There's like, you have no idea what's happening. There's no tension. There's no who's winning. There's no. It's just like a series of cuts of people getting hit with something and dying.
A Hollywood blob. Yeah.
Yeah. So I really really like this emphasis on strategy and tactics, and since the anime is from the 80s and 70s, it looks well, but it's a little bit dated when it comes to like animations. But because the focus is not on like fluid animation and cool backflips and barrels in space, it works really well. And the other part of the show, which is also really cool, is that in this anime, they have this power armor, which you see on the bottom left. So this armor is so strong that like guns are like really ineffective. They kind of like bounce off the armor. And so this turns like when you have a breaching party and you like breach a spaceship and you want to like kill everyone inside the ship, you don't really fight with guns. You fight with like these huge battle axes, like kind of like in the movie Dune, if you've seen that movie. Yeah, so it's kind of got that kind of energy, only with like giant battle axes, and that's really badass. But even in like fights with like close quarter fights with battle axes, the emphasis is still on strategy. So you see that people are like flanking, and they are taking like the fact that you are outnumbered or flanked matters. Like then you feel like this tension, like you feel like the characters are in danger. But in some shows, animes, there's no tension at all, because you know that you're going. It doesn't matter how many people there are. It doesn't matter that you get flanked. You're just gonna do something, do a backflip and kick someone in the face. I mean, there's no tension, and that's something that's really cool. And the battles are also really short and deadly. So even between main characters, so you get the feeling that even though there are like main characters, you get the feeling like they're actually trying to kill each other, and that's really important for me, because it removes all tension when it looks like they aren't really trying to hurt each other.
Yeah, when it looks just more like they're dancing with weapons.
Yeah, and when somebody is in a bad spot and they start monologuing or something, because they have to get up.
You have this principle, I think, in certain like Western media, where the proportion of strength that the enemy has is like is inverse of how many enemies that are on screen. So if you have like 100 ninjas, then they have to be like ragdolled basically. And if you have one ninja, then he has to be as a challenge. But it can never actually pose a threat to the protagonists. So there has to be. It just gets ridiculous when, like you said, you have like these 100 enemies and they have to just throw them into each other, and it's like playing bowling or something.
Yeah, and I think the combat, there's also something you can compare it to Jojo, the fighting in Jojo, because I feel like a lot of the battle scenes in Jojo there's a lot of tension, because you feel like they're actually trying to kill each other, and they're using this really stance in this creative way. So there's like the reason I like Jojo is the same reason I like this show, and I think that you would love this show as well if you liked Jojo. And there's also a lot of politics, history, philosophy. There's even a point, sorry for the spoilers, where Reinhard and Yang is in like the same room arguing about democracy versus autocracy, which is hilarious. But yeah, so that's kind of what the show's about. And you can go to the next slide.
Yep, here we go.
Yeah, so this is so here I want to go through the episode 1 and 2 battle. So I will try to keep the spoilers in the earlier episodes to spare the later ones. But so this first episode is I think amazing. It's like it's really, really great. It really sells what the show is about, and if you like the first episode, you're going to like the entire show. And that's the best kind of first episode, because then you don't have to watch like 5-6 episodes to know if you like it. So what you see is a screenshot of inside an Alliance battleship, and they have like this visual representation of the battlefield. And I put some pictures of where the main characters are. They're not in the anime, but I just put them there to show. So in this, you have the Empire, which are the blue pieces, and they are completely outnumbered by the Alliance. It's like they are surrounded and outnumbered, like 2 to, I think, twice more, I think. And,
yeah, it seems like if the gray pieces are the Empire, it seems like it's twice as many.
Yeah. And at this point, Reinhard, I will go more into Reinhard and Yang later, but now just to give a shallow look into the characters. So at this point, Reinhard is a fleet commander. So he commands an entire fleet. So all of those blue pieces. And he's 21. And Yang is a Commodore, which means that he advises the commander of the second fleet. So basically what you see in this battle is that, it's kind of, they put Yang and Reinhard against each other. But in this battle, Reinhard is in full control of the entire fleet, and Yang is in control. He's not even in control of the second fleet. He's advisor to the guy who is in control of the fleet. So in the very first episode, the Empire is outnumbered, and Reinhard is 21 and he's a fleet commander. And when you have somebody that young having so much power, in many animes, people don't really talk about it or like address it in any way. But in this show, the very first thing that happens is that 5 Imperial commanders request an audience with Reinhard, and they want him to withdraw because they think that his plan is stupid, and they don't say it. They are polite, obviously, but they want him to withdraw. And they act polite in front of him, but Reinhard says that, despite what it looks like, I'm actually the one who has the advantage in this, scenario. And they he dismisses the commanders and they leave. And the second they leave the audience with Reinhard, these are like older men in like their 50s and 40s with gray hair, and they're being ordered around by a 21-year-old pretty boy, right? So obviously they don't like him. Like they call him a brat, and they really, really dislike him, and that makes sense. And the reason I bring this up is because this show is really realistic. People act in ways that you would expect. So, I mean, if I was at work and some like 19-year-old were ordering me around, I would be annoyed, especially if it looked like that, So it's really human, and it addressed it. So yes, he's obviously really charismatic and talented. He has to be for the sake of the plot, but he has to earn people's trust and loyalty, because people dislike him basically, because he is so young, and he has to prove himself constantly.
Makes sense. I mean, you're kind of back to the Dune comparison there as well with Paul Atreides.
Yeah,
he gets a bit of pushback as well at times.
Yeah, and this realism extends to every single part of the show, the anime, and which I really like, because a lot of times you have these movies and TV shows, and they create this society and this system of rules, and the people inside that system don't act like in a realistic way. There's some really silly animes, for instance, where we have like this pirate ship, and every single member of the crew are like guys, and the captain of the ship is like this really young, attractive anime woman, and it's not addressed at all. It's like people don't address it, they don't talk about it, they just act like this is completely normal, and in this like brutal medieval society, it just doesn't make any sense. Like suspension of disbelief, shattered completely to never recover, and that's it. But this show is amazing when it comes to things like this. There's even a scene when, after this is later on in the season, but Yang rises in rank, and he comes to a point where he has a really high rank, and he's talking to a guy with the same rank, and the guy is annoyed with him because they have the same rank and he's 15 years older. So it's kind of the same example, but people act like in human, realistic ways, which is cool. But anyway, Reinhard dismisses the advice from his commanders, and he says that, despite what it looks like, them being outnumbered and flanked, they are the one who has the advantage. And Yang, on the other side of the battle, he anticipates what Reinhard is going to do. He sees that the Empire actually does have the advantage. So he goes to his superior commanders and try to present his plan for countering Reinhard's plan. And basically, Reinhard's plan is taken straight out of Sun Tzu, The Art of War, of always meeting less with more. So while they are outnumbered, like on the total, you can see that Reinhard outnumbers every single one of them individually. So what they do is that Reinhardt just charges straight at the fourth fleet, the fleet at the bottom left, and that surprises the alliance, and he just meets less with more and completely annihilates the fourth fleet. Now the commanders on the second fleet and the sixth fleet, they want to go to help the fourth fleet, but that's a horrible idea, because before they can come to help the fourth fleet, Reinhardt can just turn and like pivot towards the sixth fleet and then attack them and destroy them before the second fleet can
get into position.
Get into position. So when Reinhardt is annihilating the fourth fleet, what Young is doing is he's trying to persuade his commanding officer, who's really incompetent, that no, you can't go and help the fourth fleet. You have to combine with the sixth fleet, because if they just sacrifice the fourth fleet and then and the second fleet and the sixth fleet combine into one fleet, then they will outnumber Reinhardt, basically. So that's what this battle is all about, is showing that Reinhardt is this really tactical genius, and Yang is like his equivalent, kind of. But the difference is that Reinhardt has absolute power in this empire hierarchy, while Yang, he is he has less wiggle room. What he can do is limited because of, he's a military officer
and he only has the second fleet. Really.
Yes, yeah. But this becomes like a big part about this show, where Yang is he's really talented and he's really good at tactics and strategy, but it's like the politicians are making the decisions, and he is sent into battle under this really bad situations, while Reinhardt is just holding absolute power and can put all the pieces where he wants them. So that's the first battle, and I think it's really cool. You kind of have to suspend your disbelief that Yang and the Reinhardt is the only people in this universe who has read Sun Tzu, The Art of War. It seems really, yeah, but it's kind of strange. But for the sake of the plot, incompetent officers need to die so that the main characters can rise to power and take their place, kind of. Yes, so after, but eventually, the commanding officer for Yang, he is wounded, and Yang gets command of the second fleet, and he manages to merge with what's left of the sixth fleet, and then he managed to kind of like create this standstill, and it ends up being a battle of attrition, and then they both withdraw. And after the battle, it's a crushing victory for Reinhardt, and it's a horrible defeat for the Alliance, with like millions of people dead, basically. But in the Alliance, it's marketed as a great victory, basically, that the Alliance stopped the horrible empire. And as the hero of this battle, Yang is summoned by a politician to talk for like the families of the dead and give this speech, but Yang doesn't want to, because it's like the politician. Yeah, it's just a lie, and it's fake. And this fake politician is like sitting there and screaming.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah, but that's what's really cool about this show, because there's a lot of red pills, in a sense.
I was going to say, I'm going to have to watch this show now, because...
So it really, really red pills you on politicians, like corrupt politicians, and the role of the media and that kind of stuff. And it's not really blatant. It's there. If you have the right perspective, you will hone into it right away. But so like Yang... Okay. Yeah, I think I'm just going to go to the next slide before I go into Yang. So now I'm just going to go deeper into Reinhardt I put 3 important characters on here. So the first one is obviously Reinhard, main character, and then you have his sister Anna Rosa and Kirchheis. The names are really hard to say. So basically, Reinhard, he starts off living in like a middle class family. So it's said in the show that he's a poor nobility, which is kind of like strange. Nobility is not poor.
Yep.
So it's implied that his family held power at some point and then they lost influence and were reduced to poverty. They still had like the name of the nobility, but they didn't have the power of influence that follows it. So they move into like this middle class neighborhood next to the commoner Kirchheis as children. And Reinhard becomes friends with Kirchheis. I can't say his name. And so Kirchheis becomes stricken by Reinhard's sister because she's obviously really beautiful.
I mean, we can see that here. Yeah.
Yeah, and and Reinhard's sister asks Kirchheis when they're kids to be his friend, basically, because Reinhard is not an easy person to be friends with.
To be Reinhard's friend, I thought he got friend zoned by Anne Rose.
Yeah, the age difference is huge. So they were like really small kids, and she's older. But basically, they meet like outside, and they like say hello, and they also ask Kirchheis to be his friend, basically. And he is like in that moment, that's like a big moment for Kirchheis, a defining moment, because he's like completely struck, and he's asked to like be his friend,
basically be the ward of Reinhard. Yeah, so he takes that becomes like a core memory for him. So they become friends, and they go through some and he's asked to like protect Reinhard, because obviously when he goes to school he's like a bullying target because he looks the way he does. But quickly Kirchheis finds out that it's not Reinhard who needs protection, it's like the other kids, because Reinhard is almost psychopathic in that he goes too far. So a kid tries to bully him and beat him up, and what he does is that he like kicks him in the crotch, and then while the guy is like bending over in pain, he picks up a rock on the ground and start beating him in the head with this rock. And who does that?
Reinhard.
Okay.
So, and then Kirchheis have to like pull him off before killing him. So it's kind of established through that scene that he is a just character, a good character, but he takes things too far. So he is a little bit psychopathic in the sense that he will do anything to achieve the results that he wants. So when killing another kid for bullying you is not really,
I don't
smart.
see any "he's just like me" posts in the chat.
Yeah, but that's kind of a big part about defining the character and the kind of dynamics between these 3 characters. And then at one point, Rosa is obviously in the anime really, really, really beautiful. So at some point, a high noble sees Rosa on the street, and then there's a rumor of her beauty in the imperial court. And then the emperor, the current emperor, orders to take her as a concubine, basically, because she is so beautiful. And so then he sends someone to buy her from her father. And the father you can't refuse an emperor. So he accepts the gold. And this is a traumatizing moment for Reinhard, because he, obviously he loves his sister, and he just watched his father sell her to the nobility. So that's a defining moment for Reinhard, where he just starts to despise the nobility because they didn't earn their power. They're just, living with this inherited power, which is a theme for Reinhard. So, so him and Kirchheis, they want to save her, basically. But to do that, they have to gain power. And in this warrior-like society, the only way to do that is to join the military, basically. So they join the military, and basically their goal is to gain power and get to a point where they can just take over the empire, basically, and then you can obviously just save Anderosa. So that's kind of their character motivations, and it's also implied that as they grow older, Kidchas and Anderosa is they're in love or something. It's not really; it's only implied, but it's kind of like that's kind of their bond. Is them trying to gain power, take over the empire, and then remove nobility, basically. So
Clear them out.
Clear them out.
Say.
Yeah.
Replace
So
the current elites with a new set.
yes. So obviously, as the show progresses, he eventually gains a lot of power and eventually takes power and becomes the emperor. And when he takes power and becomes the new monarch, he completely dissolves the nobility because he has this thing about you shouldn't inherit power, you should earn it. And when you hold power, you have to earn power, basically. So if you're not able to take it, you don't deserve it. That's kind of his mentality. So while he destroys the Golden Baum's system, he's still a monarch. He's still like the emperor with absolute power, but he creates this system where it's like a brutal meritocracy. It's like a quick way to explain it. And Yang, on the other side, even describes it as a government not by the people, but for the people. So so he's seen as
interesting
this
how that works, huh?
Yeah, so he's seen as like this 1 in a million type of guy that takes power, and he creates like a good system. But he's also really brutal, and so the show is really morally gray. So when he, after taking over, for instance, he kills like every single member of the families of the nobles, even kids down to the age of 10, and he put the age limit for killing the kids at 10 because he said he joined the military at age 10. So if you're younger than 10, you're not responsible for the actions of your parents. And if the kids grow up of the nobility and they feel resentment and want to kill Reinhard, that's only good, because if somebody kills Reinhard and takes his place, that's good, right? Because that's kind of his mentality, and he even says that directly to
Darth Bane pilled, for those of you Star Wars nerds out there.
Yeah. Okay, I need to move on. So next slide.
It's just a Sigma meritocracy.
Okay, so then there's Yang, and he's a really interesting character. And I put some random people next to him because the only really important character on the Alliance side is him. But Shenkop and Julian is also really important. So his story is basically that he comes from poverty. He lost his parents, so he's an orphan. What he wants to do in his life is be a historian, basically. That's all he wants to do, to study history. But the problem is that he is poor and he can't afford to study history. So he joins the military academy, tactics division, because then your studies are paid for by the government, basically. So then he can study history while being in this military school. But the problem is that the catch is that after you graduate, you have to if you don't join the military and serve your term, you have to pay back the loan. So that's kind of the trap where
so it has some it's a little bit like Starship Troopers in that sense. I mean, I'm not quite, but it's not just
Yeah, but you see this in the US right now, that you join the military as a way to pay for education.
Yeah,
So,
but you have to. Yeah, I guess you have to pay it back if you don't complete your tour. I guess. Yeah.
yeah.
that's
So
true.
you,
So
so
it's not
you,
like Starship Troopers. Never mind.
yeah. So that's you have a lot of poor people in the alliance who has to, join the military basically, because it's the only way to pay for an education. So he becomes a
That
soldier.
can possibly end bad.
Yeah. So he becomes a soldier not because he wants to. He just wants to study history, retire, and live a comfortable life. That's kind of character he is. So he hates being a soldier, and but he's really interested in history, really interested. So that means that he knows like the details of like all wars ever fought. And that combined with him studying tactics, that makes him like an incredibly dangerous commander. So in the first episode, he sees immediately, what Reinhardt is going to do, and that tactic is taken straight from Sun Tzu, The Art of War, and it's from an actual battle, I think. So it's weird that only he knows it, but so that's kind of his character. So Julian, the guy to the right, is an orphan who he becomes a foster parent for. And Julian is he's like this young guy who's kind of like used as a tool in the anime for like Yang lecturing Julian, about history and perspective. So you have Julian who has this really childish concept of right and wrong, and then then you have Yang who has this historical perspective that is not so black and white, and democracy is not necessarily good, and monarchy is not necessarily bad. So he's a really nuanced character, but he still fights for the alliance, and that's because he believes in democracy. Like even when seeing the corrupt politicians, even seeing how incredibly inefficient it is, so what he from his perspective, it's better to suffer under the foolishness of the majority than one crazy ruler. So that's kind of his perspective. So
right, I see. Yeah.
So, but as this anime goes on, and he gains more and more power, and they are faced with this existential threat from the Empire, you see that like as Yang Wenli is rising in ranks, it comes to a point where if he could take power if he wanted to. Like he's so popular because of all his victories, and he has the loyalty of so many powerful and competent commanders like Shenkop. And Shenkop, he is a commander of the guy to the left. I mean, he's a commander of the Rosenritter, which is like a breaching party. So the guys with the big battle axes.
So
he's a really badass Shad, basically. And he's a defector from the Empire. So that's kind of his story. But in private, he suggests to Yang that, if you were to just take power and become a dictator, and you made all the military decisions, you could actually defeat Reinhardt, because you two are, I think you are a better commander than Reinhardt, but you're fighting this. You're fighting with your hands behind the back, basically. So that's what he says. But he obviously says to him that that's a dangerous thing to say, and don't repeat it to anyone, and doesn't listen to him, basically. But so that's a thing that the show, the anime, constantly compares, like there's like a catch-22 that the Free Planet Alliance is caught in, where they're fighting for freedom and democracy against this autocracy, and the only way to like defeat them, they have to become the thing they're fighting. That's a theme of the show. And at one point, Yang is tasked with taking the Iserlohn fortress, the big Death Star,
the one in the middle.
The one in the middle, which is like said to be impossible to take. But he managed to take it through some really cool trickery that I won't spoil, and that gives like the Alliance. They have a base for invading the Empire. Now, what you see in the Alliance is that all these politicians, they are like they're voting on what they're going to do. So they want to invade the Empire right now. It needs to happen right now. And all the major top military in the Alliance, they think that's a bad idea. Basically, don't do that. Why does it has to happen right now? And you see that basically a re-election is coming up, basically, and they want to win the election. So so Reinhardt now, so Young and everyone is ordered to invade the Empire, basically Empire space, and bring freedom and democracy to the horribly treated Empire citizens.
Right.
Now, and then Reinhardt is tasked by the Emperor to like stop Young with only his fleet, and Reinhardt completely annihilates the entire invading Alliance attack, and he does it in this really cool way, which I won't spoil. But he uses, it's really cool. And then basically you have like millions of Alliance soldiers, millions dead. Why? Because like some politician wants to get reelected. So that puts a really bad taste in your mouth, because you can like imagine like you being a young man in that universe, and you are like you want to get an education, so you join the military. Then
in that universe, I can imagine it in my own.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. But basically, you're just forced to do this really stupid fight, this really stupid war. So, and you're forced to die for this stupid reason, so that some politician can, it puts a really bad taste in your mouth. So you will end up hating politicians after watching this anime. Okay, so that's kind of
I already do.
Yeah.
Yes.
So now we get to the final part, which is kind of the final thing with Fasan, which is the icing on the cake. So here I'm reading a lot into this. So the show never explicitly states any of this, but if you go to the next slide. So here I'm just putting a lot of names because I want to say a lot of names. So just a map for you to keep track. So on the left, you have the important characters for the Empire. In the middle, you have Rubinsky and Kesserling from Fasan, the merchant planet. And then you have the Free Planet.
Studying their faces, yes.
Yeah, and then you have the Free Planets Alliance. And the bottom right, you have Trunit. He's a politician. So
God, that's an American dude. You can just, the leftists talk about like how characters are coded. That guy is like American senator coded.
Yeah, so I talked about like Young's perspective with like he sees how inefficient democracy is. He sees like how it incentivizes politicians to act in a way where they make decisions not for the people but for their re-election, because as a politician you only really have one incentive, and that's to get re-elected. That's kind of your job, to get elected, elected and then re-elected. And so that's kind of a perverse incentive. It's not aligned with the will of the people. And throughout the anime, there's like tons of there's a pro-war part of the politicians and the anti-war part of the politicians, because obviously many families, they're not happy with all their sons getting killed, sons and fathers, in these meaningless battles for like bringing this abstract concept of freedom and democracy to the Empire. So they vote for like anti-war candidates, but for some reason all the politicians in power are pro-war.
Interesting.
Yes.
Very
so
interesting.
Yes, and that brings us to Fasan, this third party who, as I mentioned earlier, has these. They're basically from a purely like game theory perspective. It's in their interest that the Alliance and the Empire fight forever. Basically, it's really good for them because then you can give out loans to like these war economies, and you can act like a middleman for trade. It's really good for them. So then you learn throughout the anime that basically every single pro-war politician in the Alliance is bribed by Fasan. Because when you think about it, when you have a third party who is like, it's in their interest that the war continue, and you have this representative democracy, and the people decide if the war continues, then it makes sense to invest money in, convincing the people that war is really good, and bribing or doing lobbying basically for politicians to keep the war going. And so this is never explicitly stated in the show. This is me reading into it, but that's kind of my take on it. And it really I think it really plays well with Young, because he's a really interesting character, because he's so intelligent and reflected. He has this really nuanced view of history. He doesn't really look at history in this black and white kind of way, and so he's basically not a Whig history kind of guy, and he sees that politicians are. He sees the politicians like. So he sees all the pieces of the puzzle basically, but he still ends up dying on the hill of democracy.
So all of you guys who now literally meet on Reinhardt in the chat, you're actually Yang in the story.
Yeah, and so, but anyway, Yang ends up dying on the hill of democracy, and his logic is sound. When you think about it, it is sound. I mean, Reinhardt is a 1 in a million type of ruler. You're not going to get the next Reinhardt. It's going to be replaced with someone else, and it could be another Reinhardt. It could be, someone really bad. It's really unstable. So the thinking of Young is that it's better to have an incompetent, ineffective, corrupt democracy, because at least then you are subject to the will of the people. But Fasan in this story kind of, throws curveball against that entire theory, because
luckily in our world we live in like a vacuum and nothing like that happens.
So
yes, anyone of you watching, if this made you think of anything in particular, then that's on you.
It's purely coincidental. I mean, any relation to any real life events, characters, or nations. That's purely
just pure projection from the audience, by the way. That
so
just ask yourself why you thought of that.
So basically, Fasan will make you ask the question: is the Alliance actually a democracy? Basically, and especially if you have read psychology, and you know how easy it is to influence people and be influenced and manufacture consent, and you have this like third party who has tons of money to spend on marketing and lobbying, and they're in their interest that a war that is not in interest of the people continue. Then you get this, but now I'm really stretching this, so I'm going to stop there.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, but that's a
you
good.
At least piqued my interest, and I'm probably going to have to watch this show now. So.
That's a win, I guess. Yeah, but that's all I got.
That's Legend of Galactic Heroes. If you guys haven't looked at it, you should probably check it out.
It also has some really good memes.
Oh, nice.
I came here to laugh at you. It's the only one I know.
If you have a meme, I mean, send me a link and we'll try it, but we might not understand it.
Yeah, I sent it to Luddic on Telegram.
I'm gonna play telephone with the memes here. Let's see here.
Can you
Now,
post
if
it in the
anyone have
private
any
chat? 'Cause I
questions
didn't,
either about
get it.
Jojo or Legend of the Galactic Heroes or anything else, fire them now before we leave for the night.
So let's see. Copy. Can I post an image here?
In the private chat, you can post a URL.
Oh, it's self-made, so I can't link it. It's original content. Yeah, okay, but it's fine. But
we can share it on the next anime stream. Something.
Oh yeah, when
there's a whole list that Luddic made of animes we have to.
Yeah, so someone asks where can one find Legend of Galactic Heroes, and that's a good question because it's really hard to find. So I don't really have an answer. I used piracy, but you have to torrent. Yeah, you have to torrent because I don't think you can buy it from anywhere. Actually.
Yeah, I guess that might be. It might be on like one of these streaming, like what's it called? Let me see, anime streaming website. Crunchyroll, right? That's the one. But they probably have like, what's it called? Region locks.
Yeah,
I know that Netflix usually.
So that now we're gonna hear from our sponsor NordVPN how you can bypass region locks.
Get away from the globalists using NordVPN.
Yes.
Buy it now.
Oh damn, we're too late. We're 3 hours in the stream. We should have run the commercials earlier.
Yeah, but one final thing is like this anime was made in like the 70s and 80s, and it's never gonna be made again. So if you could just Google like the remake and just see some pictures of what it looks like and how incredibly gay it looks, just as a comparison.
How do I find Legend of the Galactic Heroes? And how do I find the remake. The modern one?
I just type in remake.
Okay, remake images. Oh yeah, that does look a lot more gay.
Yeah, so you see it in art style like right away. Like a lot of the details are like in the faces are gone, and people look really anime, and it's almost like homoerotic.
It really does, yeah.
Yeah.
Here we go.
So if you try to find it,
because they're giving them like smaller faces, like they're less masculine.
Yeah, so if you try to find the show, don't watch the remake. Like, watch the base one.
Yeah, this was a very...
Yeah, and I read some reviews, and apparently it's they completely missed the point, and it's just...
interesting.
Yeah.
Now, Nordanon asks, is part 2 going to be next week, or are we going to take a break? No, we usually... try to revolve the content that we put out so it's not the same type of thing after each other every week. So next week we are doing a talk with fellow Twitter shitposter Culture Barbarian, who is he's a Norwegian. He calls himself a gonzo poet. He has a very interesting blog, only in Norwegian, obviously, but we're going to be talking to him in English and talk a bit about how he sees the Norwegian spirit and the act of cultural barbarism in current year. Sorry to sidestep your stuff here, Jason. Was there anything else you wanted to add about the remake, or anything about how to get a hold of Legend of Galactic Heroes?
Well, I use a software called Strem.io, and it's a software for just streaming torrents. And then you can, it's completely legal, but then you can add some third-party plugins.
Ah, okay.
Then you can basically watch everything with NordVPN.
That might be something to look into. Strem.io.
Yeah.
Okay. Nordan also, I started. He probably jokingly asked, when am I writing a book myself? That's probably far off. I have enough just trying to keep up with the books that I have to read, let alone write one myself. I think there are smarter people than me who are much better at writing. Okay. So, if there's no more questions, no more comments, I think we'll end the stream now. We've gone for about 3 hours. Jason, thank you very much for joining us and talking about anime, and especially Legend of Galactic Heroes. And do you have any social media you want to plug, or anything to shill, anything you want the viewers to look into?
No, I work in the shadows.
Okay, that's good. Luddic Path, anything upcoming on the meme channel?
Well, nothing out of the ordinary. Like, because of my life situation, I might have to, like, scale down on the content a little bit.
Yeah.
Got to try to, at least focusing on just getting some content for this channel. So,
yep.
That's what we're going to do. I mean, after you do the Culture Barbarian, my plan is to do, like, we do a stream on Richard Dawkins, basically. And it's going to be called The Selfish Gene and Its Consequences. I'm working on it currently. I think it's going to be interesting. After
the Culture Barbarian stream, we might be skipping a week. Just a heads up for the viewers, because of vacations coming up. I might not be able to pre-record anything, and I won't be able to do a live show one of the weeks or 2 of the weeks coming up. But we'll see how we play it out. We try to get something out every week for you guys.
But take the opportunity to touch grass if there's no missing episode.
If there's no Longhouse, don't listen to anyone else. Just go outside. Or you can read the book I plugged earlier, the novella collection, and then you can get an even stronger urge to go outside and touch grass. Anyway, thank you all for watching, and we'll see you next week.